Blog Talk Radio.
That Tim.Is knows it.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
does he ever know it? If you ever hear Tim.Is talk, you would think you're talking, that you're listening to Malcolm X,
Wow. I don't think wow. Wow. You feel like he talks about white supremacy with that much...
Tim.Is is one of the best speakers on the system of white supremacy I've ever heard. And he out-talks a whole bunch of black people with much greater precision. Get his facts straight and all that. All the nuances and everything. But like I said, I've stood right within 2 feet of Tim.Is. I've never said not one word to Tim.Is. Lots of people, black people, crowd around him, get his autograph and whatnot. They want to know, where are you from? You must come from the moon. I mean, right. I've been in the presence of Tim.Is on a number of occasions, who is very articulate. He speaks, he knows how to talk about racism better than millions of black people could ever do it.
Really?
Okay. Oh, if you ever hear Tim.Is talk, you'll know it. But I have been in his presence. I've stood next to him and all like that. I've never even said one word to Tim.Is because I don't have no reason to.
Why don't you have anything to say to him if he's that informed about racism?
Because I go according to the code. The code says I don't pay attention to any white person who's talking against racism. And the reason is, the code requires me, if the discussion comes up, there's one criteria when it comes to white people and what they are doing about racism, doing or saying. And that criteria is racism either exists or it doesn't. In other words, you don't get paid for effort.
Context of white supremacy, Gus T Renegade.Is, here hopefully to provide constructive information about what racism is and how it works. That was Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., author of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. Keep those words in mind as we move forward through the program. I do not believe in paying for yardage either. Either the job is done or it's not done. And I have concluded, unfortunately, the system of racism, white supremacy, replacing that system with justice, that job is far from complete. Our guest for today's program, the admitted racist white supremacist known as Tim.Is. Mr. Wise, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You could speak up a little bit. You're a little low.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me a little bit better now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Outstanding. We got you. Everything is good to go. We want to be as efficient as possible today. I know we have a lot of listeners, and folks are already blowing up the phone lines. So I'm hopping right into questions because we have no strangers here. This is your 3rd trip on the program, so we're getting right to work. Justice, co-host, she was not here before, but she is here now. She can explain anything she wants to tell you about herself. She is non-white, a victim of racism, white supremacy, and she has some questions for you. I want to make sure that I request, and I want to be assertive about this and making sure that the vocabulary level, we all make an effort to use lower vocabulary levels so we can be understood. And it would be most helpful if you could slow down. I'm going to make an effort to be assertive and prompting about slowing down so people can hear you, because sometimes you do talk a little fast.
I do.
Justice?
Yeah.
Rock and roll, Justice.
I'm not hearing anything. I don't know.
Are you a racist?
I didn't hear the part before that. Was that silence for a while before the question? I didn't hear that.
I just said, are you a racist?
Oh, okay. I thought there was something before that because there was about 20 seconds of silence. Well, as I've said before on Gus's program, I have, as a white person growing up in this culture, internalized certain elements of racist and white supremacist thinking, no question about it. I've talked about that, written about that. I distinguish that...
Excuse me, I just want yes or no.
Well, see, but that's not the way human psychology works. The way I've answered the question before, and I will answer it again, whether one likes the answer or not, is that I have internalized aspects of racist thinking, as I would suggest every white person in the system of white supremacy has done. Now, that is different, however, from saying that I believe in, support, and advocate the system of racism and white supremacy, which I actually reject and attempt to fight against. But I would be dishonest if I did not acknowledge that I, like every other white person, have internalized certain aspects of racist thinking. I've always said that, but I do not believe that is the same as saying, as I think some believe it is the same as saying, that I therefore support actively and advocate for the system of racism, which is a system that I find deplorable, actually.
The words that you're using, I do not understand.
Why is that?
And all I need is just a yes or no. Are you a racist? Yes or no.
See, but that's not how human psychology works. It is not a yes or no question.
What's humans, whatever you call it?
Psychology? Psychology is the way that the brain functions. It's the study of the brain. And
I don't want the brain functions or anything like that. All I want is just a yes or a no.
Right, but it's not a yes or no question. And so you're going to be frustrated if you ask me that question. I've answered the question in very basic English, and I'm quite certain that you do understand. But I know that we like to play games on the show sometimes. And so I'm going to suggest that this is a very simple answer. I said I have internalized aspects of racist thinking. Now, if you want to take that as a yes to your question, feel free to do it. But I've also said that I have also internalized anti-racist thoughts, anti-racist norms, anti-white supremacist thinking, because even though I was exposed to racist ideas, and those have affected me like they've affected everyone, I was also taught to be an anti-racist, and so I've internalized that as well. So the best way that I can answer your question is to say that I have both internalized racist ideas and anti-racist ideas. Whether that makes me a racist in your estimation, that's for you to decide. I'm simply saying it's part of who I am. It is not all of who I am.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of words. Can you please?
Excuse me, what did you say? These are not graduate level school words that I'm using. These are about 9th grade words. So it's not as if I'm using words that you cannot comprehend.
I'm only 10.
You want a yes or no answer, but there is not a yes or no answer to your question. Your question is not one that can be answered with a yes or a no. I understand, or I assume, that you have been trained to believe that everything is that simple. It is not that simple. Whether one is 10, whether one is 30, it is not that simple a question, and therefore the answer is not that simple. Can I give you an example of what I mean, and I think this will make it easy.
No.
Well, okay. I've been asked to be a guest on the program, and I think sort of basic courtesy would allow me to do that. But maybe that's not something that you believe in. I will tell you this. When I was 10 or 20 or 30, I would use this.
I don't want, if you're 10 or 30 or whatever you're trying to talk about, I just need, are you a racist?
And I gave you an answer. It's an answer you don't like. And that's, I can't tell you anything more. I've given you an answer. I think you're well smart enough to figure out what it is I've said. I said I have internalized racist thoughts and that I am opposed to the system of racism, which is to say that I have both racist aspects of my personality and anti-racist aspects. That is a simple answer. It is not a convoluted or complicated answer. It's not the answer that you prefer. It's not the answer that Gus prefers. It's not the answer that CodeSpeak prefers, but it is the only intellectually honest answer that I can offer you. And it's the only one you're going to get this evening.
So then that means you are a racist, right?
It means exactly what I said. It means exactly what I said, nothing more and nothing less. And I think that if you want to assume that that means that it's a yes, then you're free to assume that. What I'm saying is very simply what I said. It's not complicated.
Yeah, it is.
No, it's actually not. It's actually not.
It is.
It's only complicated.
I'm only 10 years old, and you're very confusing.
Okay, well, I'm very sorry that you're confused. I've given you the only answer that I know how to give you. So, that's the best I can offer you. It's an honest answer. It is an answer that reflects what I honestly believe to be true about myself. You asked me a question about me. I gave you an answer about me. You don't like the answer because the code that you have been trained in says that
I didn't even say that I even like the answer or dislike the answer.
Well, you keep asking the question over, so I assume you're unsatisfied by the answer. That's what it means when you ask a question.
Because I don't understand it.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I've given you the answer. It's the only one I know to give you. It's the best that I can do. So if you have another question, I'll try to answer that one.
Who do you know that practices racism, white supremacy better than you?
Who do I know that practices it that is in me? I don't get the last part. I know I understand the first part. I'm not sure I understand the second part.
Who do you know that practices racism, white supremacy better than you?
Oh, better than me?
Yes.
Is that better? Okay, I didn't hear the word better. I'm sorry. Well, first of all, I try very hard not to practice racism, white supremacy. I try in my work to challenge racism, white supremacy. Now, whether I'm good at that or effective at that, that's for other people to judge. But I will tell you that I know plenty of people, of course, just by virtue of living in this country, who practice racism and white supremacy very actively. You will meet those. I mean, I've met people in school settings, in workplaces, working for different organizations, and just folks who I meet every day who absolutely practice and try to refine and perfect the system of racism and white supremacy, and who treat non-white peoples in racist ways. I mean, there are literally hundreds of people, probably thousands of people who I've met who do that. I also have met people and know people who practice challenging white supremacy and racism. Most of them are people of color or non-white peoples, but some, indeed quite a few, are classified as white in the society. So I'm not sure, we literally would be here all night if I started rattling off names and positions, but there are lots of people who practice racism and white supremacy who I've come in contact with throughout the course of my life.
Do you think you could tell me 3 or 4 people?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I mean, everybody from, I would say, probably the whole board of administrators.
Tell me the names.
Well, I mean, some of these people I've known for a long. I mean, I haven't seen in years, and they're not names that I automatically recall. But I'll give you an example. The board of administrators at my college, I went to college 20 years ago, and the entire board of administrators, well, virtually the entire board of administrators, the people who make the policy for that college, like most colleges, are white, and they actually were very open about saying that their purpose was to maintain that school. It's a very sort of elite, mostly white college in New Orleans, Louisiana, was to maintain that school the way that the founder of the school had envisioned it, and the founder of that school had seen it as a white place. I mean, frankly, a white male place. So all of those individuals, the board, honestly, it's been 20 years. I don't remember their names. A few of them, Robert Bowe would be one, Boatner Riley, a couple of names that I recall. These were board members of my college. Other people would include, police that I have talked to and even trained and done workshops with, who have openly admitted their own racial biases, their own prejudices, their own racist beliefs about non-white peoples. I don't get all of their names when I'm working with them. I mean, I probably do at the time, but I don't write them down and remember them. People who've worked in corporations where I've done trainings or workshops who either admit or who after we talk for a while, it becomes rather obvious that they still continue to believe all kinds of racist things about people of color. So corporate people, law enforcement officers, teachers, administrators at my college. I mean, literally, my argument, and I've made it on this show before, is that virtually every white person in the United States. Whether I can name them all or not, there are 200 million. But virtually every white person in the United States participates in the system of racism and white supremacy. Some do it more actively than others. Some do it more on purpose, if you will, than others. But that we all end up participating in it in some way, shape, or form. And some do it very deliberately, very much on purpose. Some do it in an attempt to injure non-white peoples. Other people do it somewhat not as actively, not realizing in some occasions that they're involved in that process. But I think we're all involved in it, all 200 million white people basically at some level.
Okay, that'll be all for now.
Context of white supremacy, Gus T Renegade, Justice, and the admitted white supremacist known as C.O.W.S. Couple things I heard as we went through the discussion. I just want to, I asked this question when you were on the program June 1, 2009, Mr. Wise. I asked, do you harm non-white people consciously and or subconsciously, directly and or indirectly? Do you harm individuals because they are not white? And you said yes. Is that still your response to that question?
Yes, and the question...
Okay, wait a minute. Hang on, please, sir. Hang on, I'm not done. I definitely want to hear your response to that, but I'm not done. I'm not playing games. This is very important. And this is really at the crux of my view on the admitted white supremacist known as C.O.W.S. The problem is, when Justice just asked that question, we could have got the same answer you just gave.
No,
the presentations where I've seen, wait a minute, you're still interrupting me. I have not, and I want to point this out. I haven't interrupted you the entire program. Let you talk. I would like the same courtesy. I'm about courtesy. You asked Justice, I'm about courtesy. I'm going to listen to you respectfully. I would like the same courtesy. Thank you. Now, when I've seen you live and in person, I have listened to you on other broadcasts. This is your third trip to this broadcast. This is the only program where I hear you say all white people. It is impossible to be white in the system of white supremacy and not be culpable at some level. I don't hear that on other programs. I don't hear you freely concede, yes, I harm individuals because they are not white. I do not hear you freely concede that on other programs. And even bigger than that, the biggest issue of them all, when I look at the results, the non-white people who hear you speak, particularly in person, they do not leave with the impression that, oh, wow, C.O.W.S. participates in the system of white supremacy. Every white person at some level is participating in this system. They don't leave with that impression. They leave with the impression that C.O.W.S. is an incredible guy. I love C.O.W.S. When I have spoke with non-white people who have seen you speak and said C.O.W.S. admitted to harming non-white people on my program, they look at me as if I'm speaking another language. It is incomprehensible to them that you could practice racism in any way. And I have to believe this is done deliberately on your part. I could be incorrect, but I have to suspect that because when you were on the program in June, you said repeatedly the thing that bothers you most is when you see non-white people and they're not suspicious. When they're not suspicious of you and not suspicious of white people. You said it's logical for non-white people, victims of white supremacy, to be suspicious of all white people, no exception. You said that is your greatest concern, and I see no evidence that you act on that concern when you speak to non-white people. I am done, and I'm eager to hear your response, sir.
Very good. First of all, the way that you asked the question to me and back in June and the way that you phrased it at the beginning of your statement there is very different than the way that Justice phrased it. So when you suggest that I could have given the same answer to Justice that I gave to you, you're assuming the questions were identical, and they were not, and you know they were not. Justice asked the question, am I a racist? You asked the question, do I harm either directly or indirectly, consciously or subconsciously, non-white peoples? Those are not, to my understanding, the same question. So that is why I answered Justice the way I did and the way that I answered you the way I did back in June. Now, as for whether I harm people directly, indirectly, consciously, or unconsciously, I answered yes, and I would answer yes again, because I believe, and I think that the research on this subject says it is true, not only about me, but about white folks generally in this culture. And what the research says is that the implicit biases that are often, frankly, very subconscious, they're not always consciously held, they are often subconscious, nonetheless can affect behavior. They don't always affect it. They won't affect it every time. They will not control a white person 100% of the time, not even necessarily half of the time. But what they can do is that those implicit biases, those implicit prejudices, those implicit stereotypes, which I believe we all internalize under a system of white supremacy, can, in certain situations, at certain times, under certain conditions, manifest as behavior. And when I answered the question you put in June to me as a yes, what I was saying is I know from experience that there have been times when those thoughts have come into my head, and I know there have no doubt been times when I have acted on them in some way, sometimes subtly. I don't think that I have ever acted on them in a deliberate and overt way, but I don't think it would be honest for me to say that I've never acted on them in a subtle way or in a way that wasn't in some regard discriminatory. So I answered the question yes, because I can't imagine that the answer would be no. In a system like this, I don't see how I could not have engaged in some practice which was disadvantageous to and harmful to people of color. Even if I can't rattle them off, sort of 1 to 100, I'm sure that they have happened. Now, as for whether or not I make this clear to my audiences or whether or not they understand this to be true, I have for approximately 20 years that I have been engaged in the battle for what I call racial justice and equity. I have said repeatedly, I have written it in my books, I have written it in essays, and I have spoken it on innumerable radio programs and probably even television, though I can't recall for certain, that I believe that anyone raised in this culture will internalize the norms of white supremacy. And I specify specifically that whites will all internalize those things as white supremacist thoughts, and that non-white peoples or people of color will internalize them in a way that becomes what we call internalized oppression. They will affect everyone. So I've said it repeatedly, not just on your show. I've said it many, many times. I may not have said it exactly using the verbiage that you prefer and the wording that you prefer given the question the way you phrase it, but I have said that or its functional equivalent on hundreds of occasions. As for in my speeches, you and your friends came to the talk that I gave in Seattle a year or so ago. You actually came into the speech late, so I'm not sure whether or not that part where I discuss the way that we're all affected by white supremacy was before you came in or whether it wasn't in that speech. It may not have been in that speech. I don't give the same speech every time. I don't make the exact same points every time. When I'm asked to come in and I'm asked to give a particular talk speaking to a particular thing, it may or may not come up. It usually does, frankly, in my talks, either in the speech itself or as was the case when you and your friends came into the talk at the church that evening during the question and answer session where one of your friends, I don't believe it was you who did it, but one of your friends asked the question, and I said at the time in front of several hundred people, a large number of whom, if not the majority of whom, were non-white peoples, that absolutely I'm implicated in the system of racism and white supremacy. I've internalized those norms just like everyone else. And the people in the room, to my knowledge, were not shocked by my saying it. They didn't go, oh my goodness, what is he confessing to? In fact, the conversations that I have had with folks of color, with, as you prefer, non-white peoples after my talks, almost invariably lead to a discussion of this very issue, how I and other white folks have internalized these norms, but how I and other white folks, some of us, are trying, maybe successfully and maybe not successfully, but trying as valiantly as we know how to challenge that conditioning in ourselves, to challenge the system that bestows that conditioning upon us, and to challenge the norms of that society. We may not be good at it. We may not be doing the job, and I totally agree with the comments that you made at the outset and the comments that I heard Mr. Fuller make about, the proof is in the pudding. It's about outcome, not yardage. I couldn't agree more. I understand that. That makes perfect sense to me. But I do think that as we try to challenge the system of white supremacy, whether we are white folks trying to do that, whether we are non-white folks trying to do that, the fact is it doesn't change overnight because I stand up or anyone stands up and gives a talk or writes an article or does anything else. All these tools that we use are merely tools to try to break down that particular wall. And the fact that I haven't succeeded at it, that you haven't succeeded at it, that Mr. Fuller hasn't succeeded at it, that none of us have, doesn't change the fact that we may still be committed to that cause. So I am concerned when people overtrust, and I have repeatedly said, look, you have to always wonder. In fact, this was asked to me at a speech not long ago, within the last month, where I was asked the question about whether or not it was a non-white person asking me whether they should be suspicious of white people, and they were actually saying something to the effect of that they felt bad that they suspected all white people. And my answer to that individual, who was a college student, was very directly that it made perfect sense for them to suspect all white folks, including those of us who talk about this issue, because we have stake in the game, so to speak. We have stake in the game as people who benefit from the system. And so even when we are trying to challenge it, there is always the possibility that we can be co-opted, that we can fall short of our goals, and that they should be on guard. And I made that point very directly. And people did not say, oh, my goodness, what does he just confess to? I can't believe he would say that. In fact, people appreciated the honesty. So I'm trying to be honest when I make that comment. I am not trying to get non-white people to follow me, believe in me, love me. I could not care less about that. And I'm very specifically on point when they ask that question. When any non-white person, or white person for that matter, ask that question, I always make the point that as long as the system is in place, it makes perfect sense to be suspicious of white people in terms of their commitment to really changing that system. It always should be about actions and not just words, and I totally believe that to be true.
Okay. I want to point this out before I respond and then move to my next question. I do not believe you. I want to be very clear. I do not believe you, and I have seen no evidence to believe what you just said. And I want to point this out. Wait a minute. I didn't interrupt you. We just heard you speak for quite a while. No interruptions. From myself for justice, I would like the same courtesy. Thank you. Now, number one, Mr. Wise has a tendency, and he's been on the program 3 times. You can check the archives and see if I am speaking truthfully. Mr. Wise and many other white people who allege to be against racism, white supremacy, a tactic that they will use, I suspect consciously, to practice racism, white supremacy. They will agree with what you say. Mr. Wise just agreed with everything I said. Non-white people, victims of white supremacy, it is logical that they be suspicious of every white person, no exception, including him, regardless of how many books he writes, regardless of how many lectures he gives. You should be suspicious until the system of white supremacy ends. And in fact, even agreed with the very beginning of the broadcast, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., a victim of white supremacy, his statement, we do not award or praise yardage. We want the problem solved, the system of white supremacy replaced with a system of justice, not hordes of white people writing books and talking about racism while the system continues to obliterate non-white people worldwide. But what they will do, and I suspect this is conscious, is speak for an extended amount of time while agreeing with what you said and saying all these things that are contradictory to that. Now, I want to point this out very clearly for anyone. Mr. Wise, he's all over the web. He's on YouTube. He's probably coming to a town near you soon. He's been on this program twice. I have heard him speak consistently, and the non-white people who've listened to him and have been in the audience, they do not leave with a suspicion of Mr. Wise or other white people who work against racism, white supremacy. In fact, I have observed the exact opposite. And the fact that you're not bringing that up, I strongly suspect you are consciously practicing racism, white supremacy. I have observed non-white people clamor to you as though you are God from the heavens when you come to speak about racism. I believe Mr. Fuller has observed the exact same thing. I do not see you saying, whoa, 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 really, you should be suspicious. You don't want to be running and getting my autograph. You should suspect that I have agendas to continue to perpetuate the system of white supremacy, which is terrorism, as you said, against non-white people worldwide. I don't see any evidence of that at all with the non-white people that you speak with. Now, you can say that. I hope the people who are listening, I hope you will investigate. Speak to non-white people about Tim Wise and see what their response is. Even check out some of the people who have commented on this program when Mr. Wise has been here. See if they feel, Mr. Wise, I'm suspicious of him. I think he could be practicing racism, white supremacy, even though he sounds like he's against it. He sounds really good, but I'm suspicious. Investigate and see if that's the perspective that non-white people have about Mr. Wise. Before I move forward, I definitely want to make sure I point this out. You said you've been doing this for 20 years. I would think a white person, an admitted white supremacist, if they were really interested in replacing white supremacy with justice, they would be as gentle and kind as possible in speaking with a 10-year-old victim of white supremacy to make sure, regardless of the semantics and the word, what she asked, to make sure she overstands, hey, I'm a white person, you should be suspicious. You should be suspicious of all white people, and to make sure she understands what it means to be racist. You can easily clear that up without an attitude. Again, you're white. You're not a victim. You're not being targeted by this system. There's no reason for you to have an attitude with any victim of white supremacy. There's no reason for you to be anything less than incredibly hospitable and courteous, regardless of the perspective that non-white people take about you or any other white person, as long as this system exists. And the fact that I don't see that makes me further suspicious of your work, and the fact that I really believe you're consciously, I strongly suspect you're consciously practicing racism, white supremacy in the work that you do, just by looking at the effect that you have on non-white people. I definitely want to move forward and get to my next question to continue this. What is your view on Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's theory of white genetic annihilation?
You want a full discussion of the Cress theory of color confrontation? Is that what you're asking?
Just what is your view on her theory of white genetic annihilation? What is your view of that theory?
Sure, a couple of things. First, I think that there is no question that for some people who are white in the system of white supremacy, that the fear of genetic annihilation is among the reasons, I'm not going to say it's the only one or even the most important one, but among the reasons why at a conscious or perhaps subconscious level they fear that, and that may be one of the reasons why they manifest white supremacist behavior. The only distinction that I would draw between what I've just said, or the differentiation between that, or the disagreement that I have, I guess, with the Cress theory, is that I do not believe it is accurate, nor do I believe there is one shred of evidence to suggest that the only or the overriding reason why all white people engage in racism, white supremacy, is that fear. And the reason I say that I disagree with that, which is my understanding of Dr. Welsing's belief, is that that is the overriding reason for white supremacy, is the fear of white genetic annihilation. The only reason I don't accept that that is the overriding reason for all white people is that for some whites, there is an understanding and a recognition that race as a genetic thing is not real. As a biological thing, it is meaningless. Now, I happen to be one of those white people who does not believe that there is such a thing as white genes, because there isn't such a thing as white genes. There is no such a thing as white or black genetics that are separate and distinct from one another. But the fact that I reject that notion and therefore am not particularly concerned about quote-unquote genetic annihilation of whiteness, since after all, I can't be worried about that if I don't think there is such a thing as genetic whiteness. That does not mean, however, that I cannot be involved in the system of white supremacy, because there are other reasons other than that why white folks might want to maintain that system. Among them would be the simple fact that whiteness bestows certain privileges and advantages and has done so ever since European peoples began the process of conquest of other people's lands and other people's resources. So once that system is in place, white people might have several rationales for maintaining it that are not purely about genetics. So I agree with the idea that Dr. Welsing is putting forward, that that is among the logical reasons why a white person might support that system, and that fear, look, for neo-Nazis that you talk to, for overt white supremacists who believe that race is a biological thing, that is absolutely what I think motivates them. She is on point. But I do not believe it is accurate to suggest that that is the overriding rationale or reason. Just like it's wrong when Marxists would say, and I've heard Dr. Welsing make the comment that she long ago rejected the Marxist argument, and I agree with her, that it's only class interest. I heard her say that at Fisk back, I believe, in 1997 or 98, and I agreed with her. It's not only about class interest, it's also not only about genetic annihilation. So I think her theory is partially true. It's just not explanatory for all whites.
I want to point this out also for our listeners. I've said this repeatedly, and I hope the program has evidenced this, at least this one point. White people tend to be extraordinarily informed about racism, white supremacy. I just want to point that out. I know tons of non-white people, victims of white supremacy, who have not read Dr. Welsing's work, are not familiar with her theory. Mr. Wise seems very knowledgeable. Heard her at Fisk. He seems very knowledgeable of her work, Mr. Fuller's work, Dr. Marimba Ani, very informed, admitted white supremacist. Mr. Wise, I just want to check, unless I have been misinformed, Dr. Welsing has been attempting counter-racist work for 40 years. She is a third-generation physician, a general and child psychiatrist,
right.
Unless I've been misinformed. Do you have a doctorate in anything?
Oh, no, I don't, no.
Okay. Are you a physician?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Do you have a master's in anything?
No, I don't.
Okay. I'm just curious, checking your qualifications against a third-generation physician, general and child psychiatrist who's been doing this work for 40 years. You've been doing this work for 20 years with no doctorate, no PhD, no master's. You are not a physician.
Can I respond to that?
Go right ahead.
The theory of color confrontation, I've read her book. There is not a single academic or scientific footnote to prove her theory. Her theory is an excellent one, but it's not as if it is scholarly supported by academic literature or research. The fact that she is...
Hang on.
You weren't going to interrupt me, and now you are. So
hang on. I am interrupting you, sir, and this is important. And I'm also doing this because, as I said at the outset, it's very important. You have a tendency to be very long-winded, and I really want to try to get to as much information.
It was going to be short.
I am unfortunately going to have to interrupt you a few times, but if you say this is going to be short, I won't do it now. I apologize for interrupting this time. Please continue if this is going to be short.
I was just saying that the theory, which I think is a very interesting one, it's not as if that part of her theory is footnoted with reference to studies that have proven that to be true. When I heard her at Fisk, for example, her argument that was true was she was saying, well, I have talked to white supremacists who have admitted that that's what they are concerned about. That's not evidence. That's anecdotal. It's interesting. I'm simply saying that if you do not believe race is genetic, which I do not believe that it is, and all scientific evidence says it isn't, and Dr. Welsing does not contradict that. She doesn't say otherwise that I know of. If you don't think race is genetic, then you would not be afraid of genetic annihilation. You might be afraid of power annihilation, but you wouldn't necessarily be afraid of genetic annihilation. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. And I just, again, want to highlight we have someone who does not have a master's, does not have a PhD, does not have 40 years of experience as a general and child psychiatrist, who is making these comments about the work of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, my quote-unquote ideological mentor, according to the admitted white supremacist known as Tim Wise. I do want to point out, because you, in your letter, which I want to get to, you talked about duplicity. I do want to point this out. I talk about Tim Wise pretty much the same, regardless of whether I'm on the program, whether I'm at a meeting in Seattle, whether I'm outside. I pretty much talk about Tim Wise the same. You are always referenced as the admitted white supremacist known as Tim Wise. I'm not going to change up anything because you're here. I'm pretty open about how I feel about your work. I strongly suspect you are consciously practicing racism, white supremacy. I feel you are one of the most dangerous white people that I know of. I'm sure there are others, but you are very dangerous in my list. In fact, you are the standard that I measure suspected and admitted racists by. How close do I think they are to Tim Wise? No fear in my heart to tell you that anytime, any place on the planet. I hope you are at the White Privilege Conference, because I will be there and we can do it live in person, and I'll say the very same thing. I want to read from your letter where you talked about Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and quote unquote, and you can check me to make sure I'm reading it accurately. You said, it appears you haven't resisted this as much per se as Dr. Welsing's belief that homosexuality is a white-led plot to destroy black people. Pseudo-scientific bullshit, of course, which ignores homosexuality throughout hundreds of species, but which perhaps Dr. Welsing thinks Dr. Welsing thinks white folks implanted those in animals as well. This is from Tim Wise's letter written in March of 2009. And I just want to point out the difference in, this seems very disrespectful, very condescending of someone who has a doctorate, a third-generation physician, general and child psychiatrist, criticism coming from someone who is not a psychiatrist, does not have 40 years of counter-racist work under their belt, does not have a doctorate in anything, is not a physician, doesn't even have a master's. This seems incredibly condescending and discourteous in the way he's speaking about Dr. Welsing in a letter that he wrote to me in comparison to what he just said. And I, again, want everyone to think about that. Why would a white person even care what Dr. Welsing has to say, or any other non-white person, particularly if it's rubbish? Whatever. Who cares what they're saying? My goal is to replace white supremacy with justice, not to point out the pseudo-scientific bullshit of a non-white person. Do you have a response to that, Mr. Wise?
I absolutely do. First of all, the theory of genetic annihilation is distinct from the discussion about homosexuality in her book, so far as I can recall. So when I told you that I found aspects of the genetic annihilation theory to be accurate and other aspects I disagree with, that is not inconsistent with my views on her views regarding homosexuality, which I do think are pseudoscientific. Now, you can say, well, how can you know that? You don't have a doctorate.
Pseudoscientific bullshit. Pseudoscientific bullshit.
It is pseudoscientific.
Pseudoscientific
it is
bullshit. That's what you said. That's what you said.
And if you'll let me finish, the reason that I say that, and I have every right to say it, even though I do not have a doctorate, keep in mind, Dr. Welsing is not a biologist. She is a psychiatrist. The issue of homosexuality in the animal kingdom is a biological issue, not a psychiatric one, so neither she nor I are biologists trained to make that statement. But you know what? The theories that are accepted in the community of biologists would suggest that anyone who thinks that homosexuality is not seen throughout the animal kingdom is full of crap. That would go for her or anyone else who thinks that to be true. In addition, I would suggest she is a psychologist or psychiatrist, and the American Psychological Association and the entire field of psychiatry has said as a matter of their clinical practice that homosexuality is not considered deviant or dysfunctional. It is, in fact, a normative behavior throughout the animal kingdom. That is the official position of the professional associations to which she belongs. So, in other words, it isn't just Tim Wise saying that that belief is bullshit. It is the entire discipline of which she is a part. So it isn't about who's got a PhD and who is a clinician and who is a doctor and who isn't. There are literally millions of doctors, including non-white ones, plenty of them, all of whom believe, and the organizations to which her profession belongs all believe as a matter of official policy that her position on that is incorrect. So it isn't about, oh, Tim with his BA is saying that, and she wouldn't know any better, or she would know better because she has this degree or that degree. Those degrees have nothing to do with whether biologically homosexuality exists throughout the animal kingdom, which it does. And it frankly is inarguable among people who have researched it.
Okay. I want to point out for listeners, I don't believe Dr. Welsing has argued that there is no homosexuality amongst animals. She may have. I could be incorrect about that, but I have not really seen her speak about that. We'll get to that. Matter of fact, this is coming back up. This is going to come back up. We're going to spend time talking about homosexual behavior amongst non-whites a little bit later, but I do want to point this out. A critical part of Dr. Welsing's theory as it relates to homosexual behavior, you just pointed out that so-called experts, scientists, other psychiatrists and psychologists do not see anything incorrect about homosexual behavior. They do not regard it as pathological or deviant in any way. Dr. Welsing does make certain to point out this was not always true. And anyone, you can get the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. You can get the second edition, which was not that long ago, 60s, 70s, not that long ago. Homosexual behavior was regarded as deviant and pathological behavior by important and powerful white people who were psychiatrists and psychologists. Not that long ago, they did. It changed in the 70s. They changed it, switched their position. And this is still very controversial if you look at this, but you can check that out. But I did just want to highlight, at minimum, this would be two people who neither of them are biologists, neither of them have a doctorate in biology speaking. At minimum, I don't even think it's that. I think it's one person who has a BA and one person who has a doctorate is a general and child psychiatrist with a PhD giving her theory on a specific aspect of human behavior and having her theory criticized as pseudoscientific bullshit by an admitted white supremacist known as Tim Wise. But I could be incorrect, and we'll come back to that in a second. I wanted to check to see if Justice had any questions she would like to ask Mr. Wise. If you have questions, go right ahead, please.
How do you practice white supremacy every day?
I think the way that I guess I practice it is just by virtue of living in it. You know, if you live in a system of white supremacy, as long as that system is in place, if you're white, you're going to receive certain advantages, you're going to receive certain privileges, you're going to receive certain benefits. And to the extent that you receive those every single day, even if it's sort of passive, you're not necessarily asking for them, you're not necessarily going out and looking for them, but they're coming to you anyway, then you're practicing it. You may be practicing it not as actively as someone else who's deliberately going out to hurt people, but you still practice it. So, you know, if I go shopping, if I go driving around the neighborhood, if I apply for some kind of job or for a house and get a mortgage or, you know, anything like that where I'm going to receive benefits because I'm white, or where someone's going to look at me and treat me better because I'm white. Whenever that happens, I'm participating in it. I'm practicing it, I guess you could say, indirectly, every single day, you know. And so just about any time you go out of the house, if you're white, if you, like I said, go shopping, go to a job interview, go to a bank, all the different places where discrimination could happen against non-white peoples, and so often does happen, you'll be practicing it in the sense that you're getting benefits from it.
What do you mean by benefit?
Well, it would be any kind of an advantage. The ability, for example, for me to go to a mall or to a grocery store or a department store and go shopping and not really have to worry about the fact that somebody might think that because of my skin color I'm there to steal something, so I get the benefit of the doubt. People look at me different, they might treat me better, or trying to get a loan for a home, being looked at as being a better credit risk, so the lenders are willing to give me a loan where they might not give a loan to a black family or a Latino family or an Asian family in the same way. So there are all kinds of benefits like that. Some of them are money-type benefits, better job opportunities, loans, etc. Some of them might just be the benefit of not being suspected of things. I've talked about before in some of my writing and in my speaking that when I was in college, there was the ability of those of us who were white in college to engage in behavior that was frankly illegal. And by that I mean drug use or drinking alcohol underage, for example, and never really have to worry that police were going to treat us the way that we knew they would treat a person of color doing the very same thing. So it was the benefit of knowing that we would be able to get away, frankly, with that kind of behavior, and the fact that people of color would not be able to think that they could get away with that. So that's a benefit too. Little indirect, but still a type of benefit.
Okay, back to the "Are you a racist?" question.
Sure.
Question. When Gus asked some questions earlier, like short ones, I forgot what they were called. I forgot what he was.
Sure.
What questions they were. But those were yes or no questions, and I was thinking that you could easily answer the "Are you a racist?" question. It's either a yes or a no. I don't really, just yes or a no.
Right, and the reason that I'm saying that...
And also, if you're non-white, would you be a racist or a non-racist? It would be a non-racist.
Right.
So if you're white, then you would be a racist. So
okay. Well, if you're looking at it that way, then you can answer it that way, or I could too. But what I'm trying to say to you, and if I'm not being clear, that's my fault. But what I'm trying to say, and I'm not trying to be at all confusing in saying it, is the question, are you a racist? It's like, for example, when I was a kid, there were times when I would lie to my parents, like I think every one of us probably has done, or when I would cheat in school. I might cheat on homework. I might cheat on a test. So if you were to say, Tim, have you ever cheated on a test? My answer would be, well, yes. But if you were to say, Tim, are you a cheater? Technically the answer is yes, but the problem with saying it that way is that when you say Tim is a cheater or Tim is a liar or Tim is a racist, it seems to me, it sounds to me like that is a sort of all or nothing statement where you're making a statement about someone's core, character, that is all they are. That's who they are, and that's all they are. So I think the difference, and this is why I say it the way I say it, when I say I have internalized certain aspects of racism and white supremacy, to me, that's a little different than saying I am a white supremacist or racist, because if you say Tim is a white supremacist or racist, the implication is that's what I am and that's all I am, and that somehow is like a controlling character flaw. And I'm saying that's no more fair than to say someone who's cheated on a test is a cheater, period, end of story. It just seems to me those sound different. And so that's why I'm trying to make a distinction. I'm not trying to be cute or be smart or be confusing. I'm just saying it seems to me that the statement so-and-so is a blank, whatever the blank might be, fill in the blank with whatever word you use, is a little bit more unforgiving than to say, look, we live in a system of white supremacy, therefore, yes, I and everyone else will have internalized certain aspects of that. So, I guess I could say, okay, I'm a racist and an anti-racist, and I'm trying to be a better anti-racist than a racist, if that's, a preferred way of saying it. It just seems to me that we ought to be able to allow for the explanation and for the nuance and for the sort of specific description of what a person is, rather than just these simple taglines that we use, which frankly don't explain very much. They're sometimes more confusing than to just explain what a person means. I think sometimes to say it as simple as the question puts it is to really confuse a much more complicated issue.
Okay, that'll be all for now.
Okay.
I just want to point out live contradiction. I'm glad I'm taking notes. When Justice was asking questions at the beginning of the program, you said it's not complicated, and now you just said it is complicated. I hope everybody caught that. And that sort of foolishness just shouldn't be happening with someone who has 20 years of experience alleging to work against racism, white supremacy, to have total contradictions. It's complicated. It's not that complicated. I'm racist. I'm anti-racist. You talk about confusing. You're interrupting. That sort of contradiction, whoa, that's way more confusing than, are you a racist? Yes. I could be incorrect. And again, I want to highlight this. This is important. I'm not about dogma. I don't come on this program and tell everybody, you need to think the way I think. Everybody, every non-white person should think exactly how I think. I do not agree with Dr. Frances Cress Welsing about everything. In fact, I am not following doctor's orders today. Dr. Welsing said she suggested that I not have you back on the program because she feels when you go out to speak about racism, white supremacy, you end up confusing non-white people, and that could be the effect of this program, that you end up confusing listeners, non-white listeners, further. I didn't agree. I felt there is no non-white person, to my knowledge, who is publicly scrutinizing and critical of your work as an alleged anti-racist, and that'll probably be the only time I reference you as an alleged anti-racist, because I don't even feel that your work qualifies as alleged anti-racist work. She felt it would not be constructive. I feel it is constructive to have non-white people in you with suspicion to point out what does not make sense about your alleged efforts to work against racism, white supremacy. And I feel you have demonstrated a lot in the first hour, enough that I'm pretty certain when the phone lines hit, there are going to be a lot of non-white people who are going to be asking strong questions, and that's what I think shows progress. Not when non-white people are clumped around you like you are Jesus, or like we're in Haiti and you're bringing the last biscuit to people who've never eaten. That's not progress against racism. That's what I see when you go out to give your talks. It should be the exact opposite, where people are looking at you and asking questions and or making requests to get you to help them solve their problems. And maybe I'm wrong. The folks who are listening to the broadcast, you can decide for yourself. I do make errors. I could be incorrect, but I don't think so on this point. I wanted to ask you, because you are familiar with the admitted white supremacist known as Farrell Winfrey, who has never had a problem with me saying she's an admitted racist. She said the greatest sin that white people have committed against non-white people, victims of white supremacy, is making God look white. That has had an extraordinarily devastating impact on non-white people worldwide. Do you think that that is an accurate assessment?
I think that's a very good assessment. I think it is definitely one of the biggest ways in which white supremacy has been maintained and perpetuated. So I agree with Farrell that the whitening of God is definitely among the most important. I don't know how I can rank it, but it's right up there as one of the most important elements, if you will, symbolically, that keeps white supremacy in place and that help create it and sustain it. Yes. Okay.
Symbolically. I feel, and particularly when I saw you in Seattle, it was in a church. Symbolically, to have that white person, Mr. Tim Wise, coming and speaking ferociously. As Mr. Fuller said, Tim Wise sounds better than millions of black people who attempt to speak about racism, white supremacy, and I unfortunately agree, which speaks to the confusion of non-white people. I have said repeatedly, I would much rather have Tim Wise on my program than a myriad of other non-white people. I would much rather have Mr. Wise because he is very informed. He has read Dr. Welsing's work. He has read Mr. Fuller's work. He has read Dr. Marimba Ani's work. He's extraordinarily informed about racism and white supremacy. And you understand, Christianity has been used by racist white supremacists to further condition and harm non-white people. I feel you have to understand symbolically a white person going to a church to talk to non-white people about racism and having them come to the altar. I've even witnessed that, come to the altar with tears in their eyes. Oh, Tim Wise, sign my book, pet my child. Oh, Tim Wise, you're the greatest. You have got to understand this is simply replicating exactly what racism, white supremacy does. White people being dominant to godlike in relation to non-white people. It's replicating exactly what we see on the news every night with Haiti. White people swooping in to the rescue. Shout out to the Oreo experience. Am I saying anything crazy or incorrect? Is this pseudoscientific bullshit that I'm giving you here?
No, I think it's a perfectly fair assessment in the sense that it's
fair. Fair.
Let me finish. I think it's a fair opinion, and I'm not at all, upset about you having it. I would only say, because it makes sense. I mean, I understand why it would be off-putting to you and why it would concern you. All I would say is I have to be honest now. The idea that people are having altar calls and coming up to me at the altar and tears in their eyes asking me to touch their baby and give them autographs, I think is a bit extreme, and I don't actually think that happened in that way, either in that church or at any other church or place where I've spoken, in the way that you've described it, as this sort of over-emotional come-to-Jesus kind of moment. I really honestly don't recall that happening, nor do I know of any time when that has happened in that way. But if the point that you're trying to make is that to have a white person speaking in a church where the church has definitely been a location of white supremacist symbolism and practice, and that bothers you, I understand that. I was asked to speak at that church. I was asked by non-white people to speak at that church. I do not pretend to be in any way, and in fact I have written specifically about this and spoken specifically about the fact that the work that I do is not intended to be savior work. It is not intended to be even work on behalf of trying to liberate people of color. In fact, in White Like Me, the first book that I wrote, I said very clearly that I do not do this work for people of color. I happen to believe that people of color are capable of liberating themselves from the system of white supremacy, with or without white allyship. Now, I think white allyship might be helpful, but it is not automatically necessary. What I have said, and one is free to disagree with my assessment of it, but I do not think it is fair to question that this is indeed my motivation, is that white supremacy, in my estimation, is dangerous for life on the planet, including the life of myself, my children, my wife, my mother who is white, my father who is white, etc. In other words, I fight racism and white supremacy, or I try to do so, whether you believe that I do or not. I try to do so because I believe white supremacy is ultimately dangerous for everyone. I'm not doing it as a charity operation. I'm not doing it to try to save other people. I happen to have a higher estimation of the ability of people of color to liberate themselves from this system than perhaps you do, since it seems to me that often you think people of color are easily confused by me and by other white people, which seems to suggest that, non-white peoples are not smart enough to discern truth from fiction. I don't happen to take that dim a view of non-white peoples. I am doing this because I believe the system is dangerous for me. I believe that it takes part of my humanity. It takes part of who I ought to be and who I was meant to be as a human being, and trashes that and replaces that with whiteness, which I happen to think is a very empty kind of cultural identity. So I just want to make clear that I'm not trying to be anyone's savior. I'm not trying to be anyone's messiah. I'm not trying to do the work for other people. In fact, all of my life, I have listened to and followed the leadership of mentors of color who I worked with in communities, for example, in New Orleans for a good decade before I left that city and came back to Tennessee where I live now. There were people of color who I was following who were telling me the kind of work that white people needed to be doing, the same kind of thing that black folks in the late 60s in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, folks like Kwame Ture, folks like Rat Brown, were telling white folks, you all need to go back and challenge your people because we are not going to be listened to if we try to do it. I think that Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, H. Rat Brown, and the folks who made those comments were right in 1967, and that's the kind of work that I try to do. And I respect that you do not believe that I am sincere in that regard. All I can tell you is that that's my motivation, not some kind of savior motivation. That's just not what gets me up in the morning and gets me doing this kind of thing.
I want to point out I never said anything about your motivations other than I strongly suspect your motivations are to maintain and refine the system of white supremacy. But until that point, I had made no comment about your motivations. I also want to point out you said it might bother me that you give your presentations in a church. I want to be very clear. What bothers me is the results. The impact that I see on non-white people is not that they leave with an understanding that I cannot imagine being white in a system of white supremacy and not supporting racism. They do not leave with that understanding. I have not observed it. I have observed the exact opposite. And no, this is not hyperbole. This is not exaggeration and Gus just getting here and being cute with words. I did see non-white people sprint to Tim Wise, who was still on the podium at the altar, with tears in their eyes. I observed this. Yes, I did arrive late, but not that late. And I was able to see that, and I think other non-white people observed the exact same thing. Even when I have spoke with non-white people and shared, Tim Wise said on my program more than once, I mistreat non-white people. They look at me as if I'm speaking Latin. They hold their autographed copy of your book as though it's the Bible. No. This is Tim Wise. This guy's incredible. He speaks about racism better than President Obama. I've had non-white people say that to me. So no, that's what bothers me. I could care less whether you speak from a ladder, a porch. If you were doing constructive work, I wouldn't care. It would not bother me at all. What bothers me is the results, the impact that I see you have on non-white people that I have to conclude is being consciously done. This is not accident. This is not a mistake. I have to conclude this is your desire. This is what you intend to produce, but I could be wrong. I want everyone to think hard. This is a quick one. I'm just curious because I think this is very important information. Can you give us a ballpark idea of what your compensation is when you give talks on racism, white supremacy?
It depends. I mean, some speeches are, completely free. Some speeches are for, the cost of travel and hotel, and other speeches I get a speaker's fee like anyone on the lecture circuit that would range from a few $100s to a few $1,000. It just depends on the event. For the first several years that I did the work, it was obviously usually free or very, very little, probably for the first 5 or 6 years. Obviously, the more you do it, the more you get paid over time. I'm not going to, on this or any other program, actually state my income, but it's very easy to find out. I mean, the reality is that if you contact the Speakers Bureau that represents myself and lots of other speakers, mostly non-white speakers on the issue of race, they will quote you prices in a range, So sometimes, about 20% of the talks in a given a year are for no fee at all. The speech that you actually saw me give, for example, in the church, I was not paid for that speech. In fact, that speech I wasn't even paid travel. I think that one was completely free. So it just depends. If I come to a town, I might do one speech for a couple $1,000s, and then I might do 3 others for free. It just depends on. But the one you saw was for no cost at all.
Okay. You said it's easy to get this information. As a non-white person, I feel it would be easiest if you would like information about what someone gets to speak about racism, white supremacy. The easiest thing to do would be to ask the person. And the person that I'm curious about, Tim Wise, is right here. And he said, not interested in giving out his income. I feel that's pertinent information for a non-white person to know. How much is this person making to give these talks about racism, white supremacy? You can't give us a ballpark range.
Well, I did, actually.
Low limit, upper limit. Give it to me again.
Well, the low limit is zero, right? Those are the ones that I do for no cost. And the upper limit would be, several $1,000s.
Can we tie down several? Can we get what are we talking? 10,000, 8,000?
No. The range at the upper end, even then it's a range, is probably around 4.
Okay.
I'm just saying that's an average at the upper end, and the lower end is 0.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. No problem. Thank you. I appreciate the information. I have another quick one before I go back and check with Justice. What is your purpose, your ultimate and most important purpose for being on this program today?
Oh, I came on because you asked me, and I was, I actually enjoy, in spite of the somewhat adversarial nature of our conversation sometimes, I do enjoy your show. So when somebody asks me to come on a program, whether it's this one or any other program that I enjoy being on, I'll come on if I have the time to do it. So my purpose was just to come on and, share my views and answer whatever questions that you had, just like that'd be the same purpose for going on any program, I guess.
Okie dokie. Wow, I need to make that a soundbite. Tim Wise enjoys the context of white supremacy. Incredible. I'm going to pitch to Justice to see if she has some questions. Justice, do you have some questions you would like to ask Mr. Tim Wise?
How do you withhold information from non-white people?
That's a great question. I try not to. I try to provide information that I think will be helpful to non-white peoples and to white people who are trying to be allies in the struggle against white supremacy. The way in which I may withhold it, not intending to do so, is that I may forget to provide information. I may not always follow through with giving information that I intend to give because I could get behind on something or become overwhelmed with work and not provide it. So I'll give you an example. I only recently sent to Gus some information that he had asked me for back on the last program. I did not deliberately withhold it from him. I literally misplaced the information and did not find it for several months later. So I withheld it in the sense that I didn't get it to him. I did not mean to keep it from him and ultimately sent him some of the information that he had specifically requested and that I had promised to give. So I don't withhold information on purpose. I can't think of any time that I have withheld information deliberately that I think would be useful to peoples of color. When I'm asked questions, I try to answer them. When people ask me for data or statistical information or factual information, I try to provide it as quickly as possible and as completely as possible. But I'm sure I drop the ball sometimes.
Why do white people keep information from non-white people?
I think it probably depends on the white person, but some white people would keep information from non-white peoples, I would imagine, because they would fear that the information that they might provide would change the power balance between white and non-white people. So, for example, an employer at a job might not want to provide information, full information, to people of color about what are the things we're looking for in a job applicant, because if I'm an employer who doesn't want to hire non-white people, I don't want them to have that information. I don't want them to know, what are the things that you need to know in order to get this job. So I might keep that information from them on purpose. Or I might keep it from them not on purpose, but, for example, just because if I'm in a job situation and let's say I know there's a job opening, right, and my neighbor I know is out of work. Well, most white folks live around other white folks, and their neighbors are also white. And so if I know there's a job opening, I'm probably going to tell my buddy who lives next door. I'm going to tell my friend. I'm going to tell people who go to church with me or who live around me, which means I'm giving important inside information to other white folks, and I'm probably not getting that information in the hands of, let's say, black folks or Latino folks or Asian folks. I might not be withholding it deliberately, but I'm still withholding it if I'm not going out of my way to provide it. So if I am sort of playing that old boys network where I'm, sharing the information with just my circle of friends, if my circle of friends are all or mostly white, then the effect that I'm having is definitely to keep people of color out of the job. So that would be another way that whites withhold information.
Okay, that'll be all for now.
Okay.
The context of white supremacy, Gus T Renegade.Is, and the admitted white supremacist known as Tim Wise. I have some more questions, but I'm conceding I have a non-white person who called the broadcast, Mr. Back of the Bus. I want to definitely make sure I get an opportunity to get his question in. Back of the Bus, if you have some questions for Mr. Wise, you're on the air.
Greetings, sir. I just had a brief comment. Mr. Wise mentioned earlier that you appeared late when he spoke at the Mount Zion Baptist Church in Seattle, Washington. I was actually present for his entire duration on stage. I was there early, matter of fact, and nothing Mr. Wise said, in my opinion, motivated non-white people to suspect all white people, including Mr. Wise, of practicing and or maintaining white supremacy. And after the program, Mr. Wise stepped off the podium with some non-white people in security T-shirts to make sure non-white people approaching him didn't impede him getting out of the auditorium. Just an observation. And that's all.
It's an inaccurate one. I don't remember anyone in security T-shirts, and nor
there was security.
Anyone in security T-shirts.
There were people with security. Hold on a second. I'm saying you're blatantly incorrect. Either there are only one or two things here. Either you are blatantly incorrect, you are not remembering what happened correctly, and or you are consciously being deceptive, because there were people, non-white people, in fact, who were present, who did have on security wardrobe. It had bright yellow letters with security written on it. In fact, I almost was bumped into one of them in trying to go and ask you to come on the program when you were leaving the podium. So no, I almost bumped into one. There was security, and I remember having a discussion about the fact that you had security, non-white security at that, for the presentation. I didn't see a threat at all. At all.
I have never asked for, at any point in my life, security for any event. In fact, when I am asked if I want security, which has happened before, it did not happen. I wasn't asked that evening whether I wanted any. When I have been asked, I have always said no for any number of reasons. I do not believe in traveling with security, and I have never traveled with security or requested it. Now, if there were people there, I did not notice them. I did not pay attention to them, in part because I had not asked for them. I would have felt no reason to have security. The only reason they may have had people there who were dressed that way and providing that service, which, again, I am utterly unaware of any plans they had to do that, and it was not at my request. But the only reason I could imagine that they could have is because in the past, when I have come to the Pacific Northwest, both in Seattle and in Bellingham and in Everett and in Portland and in Olympia and several other places around the Pacific Northwest, there have been several occasions, I would say 3 or 4 that I know of, where there have been specific threats issued by neo-Nazi and overtly white supremacist groups against me, and where those individuals have come to the events with the intent to disrupt. I have never, even with that, asked any institution to provide me security because of that, but it may be that there were others who asked for that security, whether it was the pastor at the church, who I had never met until that evening, whether it was Dr. Moore, who I, of course, have known for many years, but I certainly didn't ask him for security, nor do I think he would have asked the church for it. Or it may just be that the church has a policy whenever an event is held in their building to have that, but it was not requested by me. So if they were there, rest assured, I did not ask for them, and I did not ask them to either prevent you from coming up to me or anyone else. In fact, when we went into the rectory or whatever that room is called down at the basement level, and I was doing the books, we were selling the books and signing the books, I spoke to you, as I recall, down there, and nobody, to my knowledge, tried to keep you from speaking to me. If they did, I'm certainly sorry that happened. It was not at my request. So I can't speak to what the church did, but I can certainly speak to the fact that I was not involved in the securing of those security individuals, and I don't much appreciate the implication that it was somehow something I asked for, which I think was the implication of the caller's statement.
Oh, wait a minute. I want to get him too, but I want to point this out. I believe this is the same thing I pointed out earlier. None of that was relevant to what the caller said. I did not say you were responsible for the security being there. I have no idea who made the call to organize security being at the event. The only thing that I said was that you were inaccurate to say that there was no security presence, because there was. Now, they might sleep in the building. They might be there every day. Dr. Moore might have provided them. They might have volunteered to do it. I don't know, but they were present. Back of the bus, can you get that one more time, the point of your call, because I feel he deviated greatly from what the point of your call was. So give me that one more time. You're live.
Sorry, speaking to back of the bus?
Yes, sir. Can you give it to me one more time, what your point was, the point of your comment?
Oh, the point of my comment was I was there early, matter of fact, to see Mr. Tim Wise speak, and nothing that was said by Mr. Wise, in my opinion, motivated non-white people to be suspicious of any white person or Mr. Wise himself. And at the end of the program, there were some non-white people, black people specifically, in black security T-shirts, and if I remember correctly, it said security in yellow print. That was it.
Do you, back of the bus, do you recall any non-white people running to Tim Wise, adulation, love, respect, everything but this guy I suspect is a racist? Do you recall any of that, or am I making that up?
No, I do recall that. Matter of fact, I believe he got a standing ovation. I do recall that. If there's a need for security, it was definitely demonstrated, I remember.
Okay. I actually agree with Mr. Wise. Hang on, back of the bus. I'm going to come back. Just hang tight on the line. I actually agree with Mr. Wise. I did not feel there was a need for security for him at all. I did not feel that anyone in the building had any intention of harming Mr. Wise. I felt he could not have been safer that evening. There was nothing but love, respect, adulation, and no suspicion at all that this gentleman's agenda continues to be to refine, maintain the system of white supremacy. But I could be incorrect. Mr. Wise, you commented earlier that my view that you have concluded based on what you've heard me say on this program is that non-white people are easily confused. Do you think it is an accurate statement to say that as long as the system of white supremacy exists, non-white people are confused about what racism is and how it works?
No, I don't really agree with that.
You don't think that's accurate? How do non-white people demonstrate that they are not confused about racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works?
Well, to my estimation, non-white people historically have always been the ones who have most accurately called it out, who have most accurately pointed it out, who have most accurately led the fight against it, sometimes partly successful, sometimes not. It has always been people of color, so far as I can tell, who have spoken the most directly to the problem and who have analyzed the problem most explicitly. On the other hand, those persons who are white have typically been the ones who manifest profound denial about the problem, who do not seem to see the problem as a problem at all or understand it or even know how to speak about it. So although it is certainly true that so long as the system is in place, people of color are damaged by it and are targeted by it and are, in the terminology you use, victims of it, I do not think that that somehow signifies confusion. I think what it signifies is that the system is so deeply entrenched and so deep and so real and so serious and so so unbelievably interwoven into the society that even when people understand it and know it and see it, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be able to undo it or dismantle it in a short period or even a medium-term period of time. I just don't think, I think folks of color are the most open-minded and open-eyed about the problem, and I think they see it far more clearly than I sense you were giving them credit for.
Okay. I want to point out for our listeners, I again feel that was not directly answering my question. I asked, how do non-white people demonstrate that they are informed about racism, white supremacy? And what he said, Mr. Wise, was that non-white people have spoken out directly about racism, white supremacy, clearly, and spoke directly to what the problem is, whereas white people tend to avoid that. What I am saying is that as long as the system of white supremacy exists, I would make the analogy of a plantation. If you have slaves and you're going to say that they're not confused about this plantation system, they're not confused, they got a great understanding of it, I would say these folks should be able to use that understanding to get off the plantation. Non-white people have demonstrated no ability to replace white supremacy with justice to get themselves off the plantation, even of how to deal with things that we complain about on a constant basis, just being abused and harmed by enforcement officials. We do not demonstrate any ability to even codify how to deal with that. We just go out and march and complain and make books and songs about police officers, enforcement officials harming us. This has gone on for years, decades. Richard Pryor complaining about this. Ralph Ellison complaining about this. The Black Panthers complaining about this. People marching in Oakland about Oscar Grant, Dr. Henry Louis Gates. This has gone on for eons. And we, non-white people, victims of white supremacy, have demonstrated no ability to codify how do we deal with enforcement officials so that we do not get harmed. In my view, this is just basic logic. Any person who's being honest about racism, white supremacy would have to admit non-white people are confused about what to do about white people worldwide. I don't think there's anything crazy about that statement. I don't think it's being disparaging. I think it's being incredibly honest about the system of white supremacy and what it has done to non-white people. And it is beautiful that the Oreo Experience was the guest who preceded you on this program, a non-white female who blogs about her self-loathing and how terrible it is to be black and what a wonderful thing it is to be close to white people. She does this ostensibly as a joke. Folks, you can check out the program and decide for yourself, but I feel that's incredible that a person cannot acknowledge that non-white people have not been confused about racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works.
Can I respond to that? Because I'm not saying...
I need a quick one. I need a
Okay.
quick one. I need a quick
yeah.
one. I need a quick one.
I'm just saying that the term confusion is maybe where I'm getting tripped up with your statement. I'm just saying the fact that people of color have not yet figured out how to dismantle the system of white supremacy does not suggest to me, to my way of thinking, that they are confused about the system itself. It simply means that the answer to undoing something as deeply entrenched as white supremacy, just like capitalism or any other system, has not yet been found as a solution. But I think that there's still clear-headedness about the problem. I just don't think maybe we're not really disagreeing. Maybe we're agreeing more than we're disagreeing. I'm just saying I don't think that non-white peoples are confused about the problem. I think everyone is unclear as to what the solution is going to be. I agree with that aspect, but I think the problem is seen actually very clearly by peoples of color historically. And that's why we've seen, for example, the plantation system of enslavement was overthrown because, frankly, there were 250 rebellions by enslaved peoples that weakened the system of enslavement so that once the Civil War happened, it could then be dismantled. That wouldn't have happened without those rebellions, and those rebellions wouldn't have happened had those enslaved human beings who were non-white not understood the problem. So it didn't get rid of the whole system of white supremacy, but it did end the formal enslavement system because they knew exactly what the system was.
Again, I do not agree. the problem was not formal slavery. The problem was and continues to be the system worldwide of racism, white supremacy, and the non-white people. If they thought getting off the plantation was going to do it, clearly they were confused about what was happening worldwide. If just getting out of these shackles and getting away from master is going to solve my problems, they were in for a rude awakening. And the evidence shows that clearly. The fact that you would even bring that up is kind of a repugnant example of racism in my view, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong. You all can listen and decide for yourselves. I want to go to this letter because I have referenced this consistently. I didn't bring it up last time because I didn't want to make the program about Gus T Renegade having to defend anything that I do as a victim of white supremacy. I really wanted to focus it more on Mr. Tim Wise, what he is doing or not doing to allegedly work against racism, white supremacy. And there are two letters, actually, two very lengthy letters. And I just want to point out some of the highlights. I already read one, his comment about Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's pseudoscientific bullshit. I want to point out some different aspects of the letter just to get Mr. Wise's comment, and he can check me to make sure that I've not added anything or doctored the letter, that it's exactly what he said. Have I done anything to misrepresent you in what I have said on the program or the way I have written descriptions for the program, talked about you, anything that you've seen? What have I done to misrepresent you?
I think the misrepresentation, or a partial misrepresentation, which I think I've alluded to in those emails, and I don't have them in front of me, but as I recall...
I do.
Okay. And I recall mentioning in there that I felt that your representation, for example, of, the admitted white supremacist known as Tim Wise was problematic for two reasons. One, I'm not known as that. That is my name. It's not a pseudonym. It's not something that I decided to use as a public name. It is my birth name. So I'm not known as anything. I'm named what I am named. That's number one. Secondly, the idea of saying that someone is an admitted white supremacist, what I said to you, as I recall, and I'm paraphrasing, and I'm sure you can phrase it directly if you'd like. I have no problem with anything that I wrote to you. But what I said is that it's an incomplete characterization because I have also admitted to and said that I am an anti-racist. You conveniently decide that the one admission is honest and the other admission is dishonest. That's fine, and it's certainly your right to determine that in your opinion one is a true statement and one is not, but it isn't fair and it isn't ethical to represent me as if I've only admitted to one. I have admitted to being both someone who has internalized racism, and therefore on whatever linguistic level you choose, you can say that means I've admitted to being a racist, fine. However, I have also admitted to being an anti-racist and having internalized anti-racist norms. And if you're being intellectually honest, you should mention both of those. When you do not, and you do not, it seems to me to be a mischaracterization of what I have said. I have been very clear and very specific. What I have admitted to is the internalization of racist and white supremacist norms and attitudes as a function of growing up in a white supremacist society. And in my emails to you, I analogized that to some other examples. I said, for example, that when you grow up in a capitalist, consumerist, or materialist society, you also internalize aspects of consumerist behavior and materialism. However, you can make the choice to turn against that and not to engage in consumerist and materialist and capitalist behavior. Yet you can never be free of it unless capitalism is abolished. Same thing is true with white supremacy, with patriarchy, with any kind of systemic injustice. And so it's not that you've mischaracterized. I think you have only partially accurately characterized, and I don't think that that's particularly ethical.
Okay, I want to be very clear with that's why I said Tim Wise, extraordinary with words. You got to really be careful with that. I have concluded non-white people are very confused about racism, white supremacy, and I could be incorrect. I'll stand on my program. I think my program easily evidences that non-white people are very confused about racism, white supremacy. The number one thing I want to point out, I didn't ask him about it being unethical, didn't ask him being about a partial truth. I said, can you please tell me what I have said to misrepresent you? So I want to ask a very direct, this is yes or no. Is it inaccurate to say the guest on today's program is known as Tim Wise. Is that an inaccurate statement?
It's inaccurate, yes. I'm named Tim
Okay.
Wise.
Okay. You are not known as Tim Wise. Is that correct?
There's a difference. There's a big
Wait a minute. You are not known as Tim Wise.
I guess I am, but I am named
Okay.
Tim Wise.
Okay. Hang on. That's real important. This is simple. And simple things like this really highlights for me why I strongly suspect Tim Wise is not about replacing white supremacy with justice. I have referenced a lot of white people as the admitted white supremacists known as such and such and such. I have referenced a lot of white people as the suspected racist known as da-da-da-da. You are the only person to flip out and say, oh, that's unethical, that's a misrepresentation, when you've already said it's irrelevant what non-white people think, what they have to say. I don't do this work for non-white people. I do this for myself, to reclaim my own humanity. It should be irrelevant whether I say Tim Wise, known as Tim Wise, whatever. I'm not calling you something other than Tim Wise. You are known as Tim Wise. I am known as Gus T Renegade. There's nothing incorrect, discourteous, disrespectful about that. And if you really want to know, I say it to further create suspicion about you, and there's nothing incorrect about that. We have agreement on non-white people, victims of white supremacy, should be suspicious of you. So I'm on my job as an attempted counter-racist to cultivate suspicion about you. I'll even share an anecdote. One non-white person who saw you when you came to this area, he said, he had an autographed copy of your book. He was a fan. He said, I wonder if his last name is really Wise. I actually wanted to ask him that. I thought maybe that was just a joke, to kind of be like, I'm really smart, I'm Tim Wise, ha, ha, ha. I'd never thought anything about your name being false, made up, a pseudonym. It never entered my mind. I just thought that was kind of funny that he said that, and I got the humor in that he was saying maybe he did make up Wise. Maybe that's not his last name. I don't know. I do know you are known as Tim Wise, and I don't think there's anything incorrect, inaccurate, unethical about that. In fact, I find it very suspicious that you take such umbrage with me using that to reference you, particularly as you are not the only person that I reference as known as da-da-da-da-da. Number two.
Can I respond to that when you're done?
When I'm done, and I'm not done.
Okay.
Number two, I have consistently, even on this program today, referenced you as an alleged anti-racist. We're going to shoot again. This is yes or no. Is it anything incorrect about me referencing you as an alleged anti-racist?
No, I think that's fair.
Okay. Fair. Catch that again. Accurate. I don't want to use the term fair. We don't want to be associating terms with white. I think it's accurate as an alleged.
You're breaking up a little bit. I'm not hearing you. Hold on. Say that last part again. Hello? Hello. I didn't hear that last part.
Can I can hear you. Can I?
It's sort of breaking up. Hold on. I don't know why that's happening. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, now I can hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Say that again.
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, I can hear you now, but I missed that last part, like the last 20 seconds or so.
Oh, okay. Most of it was just me saying hello and the distortion, but okay, we're good. Yeah, okay, let me get my train of thought back now. Okay, yeah. My analogy is, and I've used this for not just you, other white people, suspected racists. I've used the same analogy because they do the same thing that you do. I'm working against racism. I've written these books, or I've given these talks. I go to these churches. I talk about this every day. Look at my blog. You can't say that I'm not out here talking against racism as a bad thing. But it's like somebody saying, I'm a house builder. That's what I do. I build houses. Hey, I'm homeless. I need a home. Give me a house. And they say, okay, let's get a house. And we tromp around in the mud, and we're chopping down trees and sawing and hammering and da-da-da-da-da, and I don't have my house. And we keep working, and we're sawing and chopping, and I don't have my house. And a year goes by, I don't have my house. And the person is steady saying, I'm a house builder. Did you know I build houses? I'm a house builder. I build houses. Where is my house? The people who are anti-racist racism should be gone. And I don't see any evidence that racism is gone. It's still here. And in fact, when I see you, the impact that you have, in my view, perpetuates racism. I'm not even getting closer to my house. I'm getting farther away. When you come, nails are disappearing. Wood is disappearing. I'm further from the house than when we started. That's what I'm saying. If you're going to say you're anti-racist, as Mr. Fuller said at the beginning, we're not paying for yardage. I don't care how many books any white person or non-white person writes about racism. I don't care how many talks are given about racism. I don't care how many times you or anyone else alleges to be against racism. When the problem is solved, then we'll give out the kudos. And particularly one of the people that you know, the admitted white supremacist known as Jessica Pettit. She was on this program twice. She was furious when I said there shouldn't be kudos and applause for anyone, Dr. Welson, Mr. Fuller, you, me, or anyone else. As long as this system exists, there's too much work to do. We're not jumping up and down just because somebody sounded good today.
Sure.
And she was furious. She stopped. She said, that is the most offensive thing. She interrupted me and got huffy.
Right.
What? Just because I'm not willing to come and hug Tim Wise and pat him on the back? No. I'm on my job. I'm doing exactly what you said is the logical thing to do, to be suspicious. That's one of the key reasons why I keep referencing you as as the admitted white supremacist known as Tim Wise. It cultivates suspicion, and just the fact that you don't like it further encourages me to keep doing it, just because a white person is not pleased with my efforts. If you can give a quick response, because I have other questions, and I definitely want to get to the phone line. Sure. Be concise, please.
Sure. I absolutely am not offended by you saying, that there should be no kudos until the system is dismantled. It makes perfect sense to me that you would say that and that you would feel that, so that's fine. As far as the part about known as Tim Wise, the thing that I was saying in that email and the thing that I'm saying now, I had no doubt that the motivation for your doing it was to cast suspicion. And the only thing that I don't appreciate, and I don't mind, you being suspicious of me and saying, for example, alleged anti-racist, that's fine. The part about my name, though, this is my family. This is my family name. It is not concocted. My guess is your birth name is not Renegade. Some people make up names. Other people do not. I did not. That is my family name, and it's a family of which I'm quite proud. So when the implication is made, which you have all but admitted to by saying that you do it to cast suspicion, when the implication is made that this may be a pseudonym or something that is made up, I take it as not a racial thing. I couldn't care less about that. I take it as a criticism or a slam or an implicit slur against my family. Thus, I do not appreciate it. It is my name. It is the name that I was given. It has always been my name. You may or may not choose to believe that. If you choose not to believe that, then there is nothing that anyone could tell you about anything that you'd likely believe, and that is fine, and I am amused by that. But the reality is that that's my name, and when you attempt to, I think, cast doubt upon that as if somehow I just chose that because it was sort of cute and sort of smart, I take it as a criticism of my family, not as a white person, but as someone who that is the name of my people. And so I think that's what to me is absurd. There's nothing that would prevent you from saying the alleged anti-racist or the admitted white supremacist named Tim Wise. That would not diminish the force of your argument at all. It would not diminish the force of your suspicion at all. And so I think there's no reason not to do it as a matter of common courtesy, but that's up to you.
I find nothing discourteous about it at all. You said absurd. What I find absurd is the system of white supremacy. And I get to do my Godfather line. This is not personal, Mr. Wise. I do not know your family. I don't know anyone that's a friend of yours other than Dr. Moore, I guess, and Jessica Pettit, but I don't really know them personally. This is not personal. This is the business. We have chosen, you and I, to work against racism, white supremacy, and a part of that is going to be uncomfortable. It should be uncomfortable for you as a white person and an admitted racist. It should be uncomfortable for you for this system to be dismantled, for your privilege to be deconstructed. It should be uncomfortable. I don't think there's anything discourteous about you being referenced as the admitted white supremacist known as Tim Wise. In fact, I think even to spend that much time troubling about this, I find absurd. I'm not calling you something other than your name. I have not name called you. I don't reference your work as bullshit or anything else known as Tim Wise. And you're not the only one. It's not even like I'm picking on you personally. It's a business strategy that is not rooted in casting suspicion on your family name. It's rooted in casting suspicion about you as a white person in the system of white supremacy. And you've already agreed there's nothing incorrect, illogical, immoral about that. I have two important things I need to get to, but I am going to go to the phone lines because I know people called in and they have questions. I'm going to go to the phone lines and double check with Justice, and then I'll finish with my two, because I do have a request that I want to ask Mr. Wise, but I want to go to the phone lines to make sure that people do get to ask their questions. The number is 347-215-6071. Today I do not want comments. This is not soapbox time. This is questions. Ask your question. Try to be as concise as possible, but we're not reading poems today or anything else. This is we're strictly business today. So 615. I'm sorry. 111. Someone's calling in at 111. You have a hand up. If you have a question you would like to ask Mr. Wise, you're live.
Okay, I'm taking the chance that that's me.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Wise. I've heard you say that you do not recall ever consciously practicing racism by an act of omission rather than commission, and that you do not believe that people who are not white are lacking an ability to understand the problem of racism and white supremacy. Do you think it is reasonable for us to believe that white people could have dominated people who are not white in a ratio of 9-to-1? While doing so subconsciously and or passively?
Oh, no. At the systemic level, I don't think that it's possible for that system to have been created or maintained only on the basis of subconscious bias. No. But I do think that subconscious, or what psychologists now call implicit bias, is certainly a very prevalent problem in the modern era. But historically, look, the system of white supremacy was created very much on purpose. It didn't just happen. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't the result of omission. It was the result of commission. But some white folks who help perpetuate that system do it indirectly and without deliberate intent. But you're absolutely, the premise of your question, if I'm getting it right, is correct, that the system itself could not have been maintained only on the basis of subconscious stuff. It clearly also required, and still requires at some level, conscious manipulation and conscious action.
May I ask a follow-up question, Gus?
Shoot, go ahead.
Okay. So that if it does still require conscious acts of commission in racism and white supremacy, is it reasonable for us to believe that you do not recall ever practicing a single act of racism consciously and by commission rather than omission?
Well, it may or may not be. What I will tell you is the fact that the system requires deliberate racism on the part of some within the system of white supremacy doesn't require that all whites within that system must also engage in commission. That's the sort of sick element of the system, is that the system does not require unanimity. The system requires white folks to be, on some occasions, oblivious to their own participation in it, oblivious to the way that they have internalized it. So, and when I say I do not recall deliberate acts of racism, that doesn't mean I've never, and I want to be clear on this, I'm not saying that I've never done such a thing. I'm saying, off the top of my head, the racism that I can recall engaging in are A, thoughts that have come into my head that I have acknowledged many times in writing and in speeches, and B, omission, not speaking up when I knew that I should have. That doesn't mean that I've never committed a racist act, though. I'm just saying I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm not coming up with those times when I can say, yes, this was a deliberate, conscious act of racism. Not saying that it's never happened. I'm just saying I cannot recall those, but I can recall acts of omission for myself.
Gus, I would have a follow-up question, but I'm sure there are other people. I'll hang on the line.
Shoot, go ahead.
Oh, me?
111? Yeah, go ahead. Go.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, does that ring any bells with you? I don't know if you were of how old you were in 1973 during the the Senate hearings on the impeachment of Richard Nixon.
I was 5.
Oh, okay? Have you seen tapes of them?
Yeah, the impeachment hearings, sure.
Okay. I'll use the word twice, recall. Do you recall when you watched those tapes or listened to those tapes, the statement response being, I do not recall, I do not recall, I do not recall?
Yeah, I remember that. Sure.
Can you understand how that would sound similar to people who are not white?
Sure. Oh, and look, if someone wants to think that I'm just lying and that there are all kinds of examples of my deliberate acts of racism, they're free to think that. I think if that charge is going to be made, it's only a matter of responsibility that someone actually point them out. And when people have pointed out to me things that I have done which are racist in their effect, if not their intent, I will acknowledge them, have acknowledged them, both in print and in speeches. So I am not against the idea that those things have happened in my life. I'm simply saying that from the time that I began to think seriously about this subject, I can think of dozens of acts of omission. I can think of several times when racist thoughts came into my head and I did not act on them in terms of commission. I cannot think of any instances where I deliberately set out to injure a person of color and to benefit myself as a white person. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. I'm just saying I am not aware of any such time. So and one can take that or leave that, believe that or not. But if one is going to disbelieve it, it seems like one should have an example or evidence to that effect, or it just seems like it's an empty sort of accusation. But, whatever. I mean, people can believe what they choose to believe. It's fine with me.
Do you think the very existence of a system of white supremacy, which you have acknowledged can only exist and continue to be maintained by conscious acts of commission of racism, is the proof that a large number of white people have to be so acting, and that it is likely you fall in that subset of white people who are so doing? Is that proof?
No, I don't think that's proof. I think that that's a possible theory, and it's a possible explanation. I think that the fact that the system requires some degree of deliberativeness does not mean that most, let alone all whites, have to be consciously choosing the system of white supremacy. The system is so ingrained that, frankly, if white people never thought about it at all, unless they were actively challenging it, it would remain in place, as far as, the white role in helping to undo it. As long as people are not actively challenging it, even if people are not actively reinforcing it, it will stay there. The same is true with any system of injustice. So I'm just saying that, the fact that commission is necessary on the part of some doesn't mean that commission is necessary or required on the part of all or even most. A very small group of individuals acting deliberately to maintain division is frankly quite enough to maintain a system of oppression, as long as everyone else is just sleeping through it and not paying attention and not thinking about it and ignoring it. That's how systems of oppression, in my understanding of systems, that's how it's maintained. And not just racism, any other system of oppression in history. It usually has been a small group of the dominant majority that have been the ones actively engaged in maintaining the system, and everyone else is being propagandized to accept that system, to not think about that system, to go to sleep in the face of that system and to ignore it. And again, I could be wrong about that, but that's my sociological understanding of how systems operate.
I believe that was Cree. I could be incorrect. Hang tight, because a couple other folks called in. I definitely want to give you some time if you have other questions that you'd like to ask. Caller from 303 called in. You have a question for Mr. Wise?
Yeah, I got a quick comment and then a question. Can I be heard? Hello? Can I be heard?
Hello?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. I was also in attendance at the you spoke in Seattle at the church, and I saw white people, particularly black people, coming up to you with tears in their eyes, thinking you were so great too, and while security was by your side. But to my question, this is January. When you were on the program, I believe almost a year ago, you agreed to be constructive, helpful for non-white people if non-white people were aware of constructive ways to invest and you said you would provide all the information on how you invest. Have you done this? If so, where is it? If not, why should I believe you are really interested in helping non-white people, sir?
Well, actually, as I recall, the answer that I gave to that question was that I'm not aware of, we don't have investment, we don't have stock, we don't have investments. My family doesn't, we don't have that kind of money that we have investments in stocks or portfolios or anything like that. And I believe that was my answer at the time. What I said was...
No, at the time, I'm sorry, sir, not the, you said at the time is that your wife handles that thing and you
handles all the handles all the financial stuff, but
yeah,
we don't
you
have
would get information and then get back to the host with that.
Right, but we don't have investments at all, and I think at the time I said that. What I said was she manages financial stuff like paying bills and that kind of stuff. We don't have a stock portfolio. We do not have real estate. We do not have property or assets other than our home, so there's nothing to tell. If there were, I would be absolutely willing to give advice if I thought it would be helpful, if I thought there was some investment that I knew of that would be good for people to have, or some stock that would be, I would be absolutely willing to share that information. But I don't have that kind of information because I don't have that kind of asset. I don't have those kinds of portfolios, stocks, assets, bonds, any of that stuff. So if I did, I'd share it. I just don't have anything.
Do you invest your money anywhere at all?
It's in the bank, like in a checking account. That's literally where our money is. We don't have a portfolio. So no.
What about like any other particularly white people who do invest their money? Can you provide some of that information to help non-white people?
I don't know where other people invest their money. I have no idea. It's not like I don't talk about that with other people because I don't have any of that. I'm sure there are white folks who invest in the stock market. I'm sure there are white folks who invest in, who have 401ks. I don't have a 401k because I don't work for a company that has such a thing, so I don't have that kind of thing. So I don't know. If I had that kind of inside knowledge, I'd be more than willing to share it, but I don't have it, and so there's really literally nothing to tell.
Would you say you're investing your money in the best way you know how?
I'm saying, well, we're not invested at all. We just don't have stock, and frankly, were we going to, given the way that the economy has been in the last 18 months, likelihood, thankfully, we didn't have investments in the stock market because we probably would have lost our shirt at this point.
My question is
we're not real getting into it either at this point. It's not very stable, so I'm not likely to be investing in anything anytime soon.
Are you currently investing in the best way you know how?
We're not investing in any. I don't know how to answer your question except we're not investing. I don't have any knowledge about how to do it or when to do it or where to do it. I don't have a financial advisor. We don't have any of that, and probably should be doing it, frankly. I suppose it would be smart to do it, but we haven't, and I don't know how, and I don't know anyone to turn to who I trust to do that. So at this point, we just don't have that.
Thanks, sir.
Okie dokie. Someone called in at 404. Are you there with a question for Mr. Wise at 404?
Is that me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hey, Gus. I don't have a question. I was just listening. But thanks.
Oh, okay. 404. Okay. If you do change your mind and you have a question, press 1, and I'll see your hand up on the switchboard. Just press 1. Back of the bus, did you have a question for Mr. Wise? Back of the bus, your microphone is open. Are you there?
Yes, sir, I am. Just a brief question, Mr. Wise. Do you own a house, or your family? Do you live in a house that you own?
Yeah, we have a house.
Would you say that's a form of investment?
Oh, it's the only asset we have. Absolutely.
Oh, sure.
But there's no advice that I can give about that. In other words, I have a house, but I don't know how to advise someone else about how to have a house. There's no secret to that I'm aware of.
Interesting. I don't have a house, and I know many other non-white people who are in the same position as me, and I suspect you could share some information about how we could go about acquiring a house, but not the most important thing. Replace white supremacy with justice. No further questions, Gus.
Thank you. Thank you, Back the Bus, calling into the program. These numbers are throwing me a little bit. I'm going to go to Justice because she has some questions. But before I do, I think 303 had one more comment, and then I'm going to go to Justice to get her questions. 303, you're on.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure I got on record and be heard. I was also in attendance at the church in Seattle when you spoke there, Mr. Wise, and I was quite close, and I saw the non-white people, particularly black people, approaching you after you spoke and whatnot with tears in their eyes, coming up to you as if they thought you were just super great and whatnot else. No sense of suspicion at all that I could detect. And they did have to come up next to you while security was standing there, which just observation.
Thank you for sharing your observation, 303. I believe Justice, she said she had a couple questions. I wanted to get her because I have two questions as well, and I'll check with Cree to see if we're good on the questions. But Justice, if you have some questions, please go right ahead.
Earlier you said prejudice 2 times. What do you mean when you say prejudice?
Well, I'm trying to think of the way I used it. I'm assuming, what I normally mean when I use that word is a belief in a prejudgment or a belief about people on the basis of, let's say, their skin color, for example. That would be a negative prejudgment, a belief that that person, because of their color, let's say, was not as intelligent, not as capable, not as hardworking. There are lots of different types of prejudice. One of the things I mentioned was, that when I was speaking with you before about the benefits of whiteness, and when I go to the store and not being suspected of being there to steal. Well, if a non-white person goes to that same store and they are suspected of being there to steal or to shoplift, that's a form of prejudice. That's a racial bias, a racial prejudice that is held against them. And so that's what I mean when I say prejudice is a prejudgment, typically a negative prejudgment against somebody.
You said bad earlier. What do you mean by bad?
I'm sorry, what word bad?
Yeah.
Bad? I'm not sure how I used it. I'm not sure what you mean. Bad is the opposite of good. I'm not quite clear on what you mean.
Do you think non-white people can be racist?
Oh, okay. I think that non-white people...
Yes or no?
I think no in terms of the system of white supremacy. And the reason I say it that way is because I think that racism, to me, is 2 things, okay? And I say this because any word that ends with ISM, any ism, is 2 things. It's an ideology and it's a system, just like capitalism or socialism or communism. So at the level of the system, I do not believe that non-white people can be racist because they do not have the institutional power to implement racism. At the ideological level, anyone could be racist in the sense that they could believe in racism, they could believe that their own group was superior or that another group was inferior. So that's a form of racism, but it's not a very potent form. And so when I'm asked that question, I always say no at the level of the system, yes at the level of ideology, but the ideology piece is not that important if you don't have power. So basically, the way that I think you're asking the question, the answer would be no, that they can't be in any real functional way.
Okay, thank you. That'll be all.
Thank you. You bet.
Context of white supremacy, Gus T Renegade, Justice, and the admitted white supremacist known as Tim Wise. I think this has been a constructive program. I could be wrong. We'll have to see how non-white people respond. I have a request. I'm about business. Mr. Wise, I feel you are one of the most well-known, well-liked, respected white people, really individuals, period, who talks about racism, white supremacy. This program, since you last were here, oh my gosh. Everybody that's on the line, if you called in, I had to put you on because the switchboard crashed immediately at the 2-hour mark. So you're on the line, but I need you to be quiet if you're on the line. Mute your phone if you're on the line. I was trying to be courteous to get people who called in so you could ask questions if you have them, but I need you to be quiet. I'll call out your line if you want to ask questions, but keep the noise down. Thank you. As I was saying, you are, Mr. Wise, one of the most well-known, respected white people who talks about racism, white supremacy. Since you were last on this program, the C.O.W.S has been gaining support, I'll say. More people are listening to the program. It has been consistently ranked as the #1 educational program at Blog Talk Radio. I am all about exchanging views, not playing games, as you said earlier, exchanging views, constructive information on racism, white supremacy. I feel it would be incredibly constructive to have you on the program consistently to discuss our views on racism, white supremacy. The request that I would like to make, I would like you to come on the C.O.W.S once a month from now until July. I don't know if you've been listening. I've guaranteed this program will end on August 5th, 2010, unless I get a MacBook Pro with a carrying case. So it's very possible this program will be gone by August 5 of this year. I would like to do as much as I can to work constructively against racism, white supremacy. I think having you on the program once a month until that time would be immensely constructive for my listeners to know at least once a month Tim Wise will be on the show to share his views. We can see where we disagree. I have things I didn't get to. I'm certain there will be incidents of racism that will be popping up in the news that we can discuss. We can talk about the Haiti situation. This would be you investing some of your privilege as a white person, an admitted racist white supremacist, in my program. I can guarantee you being on this program once a month, this program will become even more popular. People will be flocking just to hear Gus T Renegade and Tim Wise exchange views once a month. Not asking for any money, not asking luggage, sack of gold, a house, investment tips, just a little bit of your time once a month from now until July, one program per month to exchange views. Is that something you would be willing to do, Mr. Wise?
Absolutely, sure.
Okay, so we have that. That's a guarantee. I can get one program per month until July. You'll come, we'll discuss racism, white supremacy, one show a month?
I think we can make that happen with no problem, yeah.
Okay. I would like to go ahead and set up the next date for February before I get to my last question, because Dr. Frances Cress Welsing will be on this program. She's scheduled to be here February 7th.
Okay.
Boy, February 7th is Super Bowl Sunday. Dr. Welsing's show is scheduled for the time of the kickoff to the show. I just want to flex my commitment to racism, white supremacy. I will not be watching the game. I'll be talking to Dr. Welsing. I guarantee you, if you come on that show, a whole lot of people will disregard the game to come hear Dr. Welsing and Tim Wise on the same show to discuss racism, white supremacy, and maybe you all can share where you disagree about her theory. Do you think you have time in your schedule to come do the show on February 7th?
I'm traveling that day, actually, and I would love to be on the show sometime with Dr. Welsing. That I would be honored to do it. I'd be glad to do it. That particular day, I'm traveling almost the entire day, from the fairly early morning until the evening. So the 7th is not going to work for me. But if we can make another day February is a busy. I mean, I've got a lot of traveling that I'm doing, but I've got a lot of open dates as well.
Okay.
The 7th won't work, but I mean, we will make it happen for sure at some point in that month.
Okay. I'm looking at my calendar. I like to be business. Since I've got you here right now, what about February 21st? I believe that is a Sunday.
That is a Sunday.
Third Sunday.
Yeah, actually the 21st would work well.
Okay. What time would be best for you on February 21st?
I'm pretty flexible on that. I mean, whatever, I'm 2 hours ahead of you, so that just has to be considered, obviously. But, sometime around this same time is fine with me if that works well for you, evening. But I could probably do, mid-afternoon also, whatever works for you.
Okay. February 21st, we'll do same time. February 21st, 6:30 p.m. Tim Wise back on. Okay, that's great. And we'll do once a month until July. I think that'll be great. We can exchange views, and hopefully we can get Dr. Welsing on one of those shows. And I think that would be fantastic. My last question, and symbolism for everybody that's listening, February 21st, not only is February 21st the anniversary, 1 year anniversary of the cows, February 21st is the 45th, there we go, get my math correct, 45th anniversary of the assassination of Malcolm X, February 21st. Tim Wise, fourth trip to the cows, 6:30 p.m. Central, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Mr. Wise, what is your view of the film Monsters Ball with Halle Berry and Billy Bob Thornton?
I remember seeing it. It's been a while. I do remember being disturbed by it. And I remember thinking two things. One was that I thought that the scene, in particular the sexual scene between Halle Berry and Billy Bob Thornton, was really highly exploitative, I thought, of Halle Berry's character. And I thought it was unnecessary, and I thought it was exploitative, and I thought it was lurid in a way that Hollywood often treats subjects of sex generally, but especially in regard to this white man and this black woman. And I also thought, secondly, when she won the award for, I guess, Best Actress that year, right? She, although I think she's a brilliant actress and a fantastic performer, it disturbed me that, it seems as though when non-white peoples or people of color win awards for programs, it's often for playing these somewhat debased, pathetic characters. And I'm afraid, for example, the movie Precious, and I know that Monique has received this nomination for her performance in Precious, which, on the one hand, it's a brilliant performance, but it's also this very negative, somewhat debased character that she's playing. And so it bothers me when brilliant black artists, in this case, or get awards and get recognition only when they play like the most objectionable character. So it's Denzel Washington winning for playing this brutal, horrible cop in the film, I don't remember the name, a couple years ago. So that was my thought about Monsters Ball, was one, I thought that particular scene was horribly exploitative and offensive on a number of levels. And I thought that the fact that it took that for her to get recognition was really unfortunate, but is very common, frankly, in Hollywood.
You said, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly, you said debased and pathetic. Is that correct about Halle Berry's role?
I thought that the way that role was written, yes, I thought it was a character that was I thought she was a pathetic character in the sense that she seemed, the way it was written, and like I said, it's been, 9 years since the film came out, or 8 years. I just remember thinking that it was sort of pathetic that she needed this white man so badly, that the story seemed to revolve, as I remember it, around, and as I felt at the time, it seemed like she was so dependent on him, and needed him, and to me that was a debased position for her to be in that story, and I just thought it was disturbing that that's how the story was written. And that was the way they chose to portray her. Same thing with Precious and Monique's character. I don't think you have to portray the young woman's mother as this sort of uncaring, unfeeling, quote-unquote welfare queen, as the stereotype that's so common, in order to tell the story that the filmmakers are trying to tell in Precious. But it seems as though Hollywood does that. They go overboard in presenting characters in this sort of pathetic and debased way when they are characters of color, and I just think that's disturbing.
Want to highlight? I said confusion. I said really. To me, it's a white person telling me that non-white people are not confused about racism, white supremacy. It is offensive. It is offensive to hear that from a white person, and in my view, the fact your view on Monsters Ball and the fact that I think we are knowledgeable that Halle Berry cried on stage at the honor of receiving an Academy Award for her portrayal in a role that you said was written in a debased and pathetic manner, and that Hollywood had white people, suspected racists who make films, have a tendency of showing non-white people in pathetic roles in relation to white people and needing white people, dependent, subservient to white people, and in this case, not only being dependent upon and subservient to white people, but being sexually exploited by an overt racist whose father was also overtly racist and whose father bragged about sexually exploiting non-white people. I believe his line was exactly, he had a thing himself for dark oak. I'm pointing this out not only to highlight the confusion of having non-white people who are proud of this film and view this as an accomplishment that she was recognized and awarded for her performance in Monsters Ball, but also to highlight my view on why sexual intercourse is extraordinarily incorrect under the system of white supremacy. The symbolism of having powerful white people reward Halle Berry for her performance in that role is extraordinary for me and cannot be ignored. It speaks volume to the pleasure, that's all I can conclude, the pleasure that white people derive from sexually humiliating non-white people. That's all I can conclude. Do you think that's accurate? I mean, you're very informed. Did what I just said, did that make sense to you?
Well, I don't know if the people who made the film deliberately derived pleasure from that or not. Honestly, I can't say. I can say that I think it must mean something that these are the kinds of roles that black people are rewarded for, even though they've done far better work in other roles. And these are brilliant artists. And the fact that it takes a role like that, or Denzel Washington, again, playing a brutal and vicious cop in the film that he won for, it's a different kind of debasement. Nonetheless, it is debasement. Says to me that the Hollywood film system, and particularly the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences, whatever it's called, that does the Academy Awards and actually determines the winners of these things, that they clearly are more comfortable, I can certainly say this without fear of contradiction, more comfortable with people of color in those kinds of roles than they are people of color in strong, independent, self-minded, assertive, autonomous, proud and strong black and brown roles. And so whether they derive pleasure from the sexual exploitation piece of it or not, I don't know any more than I know why in the film Deliverance, if the filmmakers got pleasure out of, having Burt Reynolds and these other white characters, sodomized by hillbillies in the woods of Oklahoma. I don't know whether they liked it or not, but I do know there's got to be something that leads a filmmaker to want to tell a story like that, and certainly that leads people to think that is the ultimate performance, as opposed to saying, wait a minute, why is it that these actors and actresses of color seem to only get recognized for roles like that, and it seems that those are the kind of roles that get written for them, and what does that say? To me, those are the questions that we ought to be asking, and I'm more interested in that than trying to probe the psychosexual, sort of tendencies of filmmakers. I just want us as a society to ask why it is that the system produces that kind of work and that kind of recognition, as opposed to other types of work and other types of recognition. But I can't speak to their psychological state. I have no idea.
I can only suspect about the motivations of the filmmakers, but I can, again, same thing that I do with your work. I look at the end result. The end result, a non-white actress, specifically a black actress, never wins the Academy Award for Best Actress. That just never happens. Hattie McDaniel last time. It just does not happen. I think that is extraordinarily important and symbolic that a black actress is given the highest award from white people in Hollywood, suspected racists, for engaging in sexual intercourse with a racist who murdered her husband, in an incredibly degrading manner that you say, where she's dependent on this white person who has exhibited explicitly racist tendencies in the film. This is what we award and praise her for. That is extraordinary. And I really feel you skirted the issue, pun intended, the issue of really honing in on the sexual exploitation that is represented in Monsters Ball and how white people receive that film. And I'm highlighting because I think this is huge. This is huge. The things that I think are very important, I really make an effort to focus on that and call attention to it consistently. You say non-white people not being suspicious of white people is one of your greatest concerns. I don't see you working to highlight that concern. I work consistently to highlight one of my concerns, non-white people engaging in sexual intercourse with white people, because I have seen consistently it has extraordinarily devastating impacts on non-white people, and particularly their ability to be honest about racism. Even from this program, to have a suspected racist come on the program just this past weekend, his lone indicator that racism, white supremacy is on the decline, intermarriage statistics. Hey, white people are okay marrying non-white people. That's his lone indicator that white supremacy is on the decline. When you were on the program in June, I had just talked about sexual intercourse and how non-white people confuse this with progress because they can have sex with white people, marry white people. Had a caller, Mr. Dave Myers, he's a non-white person, call in and say, I see racism. How come we don't have non-white actors in sexual scenes or dating a white person on television? He called in and said almost on cue. I couldn't have planned it better to have a non-white person call in and say, I don't see progress. I don't see black and white couples on television. This is another area where I say that non-white people are extraordinarily confused about racism, white supremacy, and vulnerable to exploitation, just like Halle Berry. I would play a clip. I don't have it. I'll get it for the 21st. That's my view. I want to see what the folks on the line say, and then I want to hear your response, because I really feel if you were really serious about racism, white supremacy, you would be aggressively calling that out. You have a blog. You have a book. I have not seen you make any statement about Monsters Ball. I feel that is extraordinarily important, that film and everything that happened around it, calling attention to that. But to do so, you got to focus on sexual intercourse and how that damages non-white people. Cree, you're on the line. Back of the bus, you're on the line. And 404, you're on the line. Just about this specifically. If you have something else, you can get that in later. But this specifically, I just want to get your view, and then I'll hear Mr. Wise's response.
Yeah, I'll be concise. I don't see how what you said is illogical. I completely concur.
I agree completely as well. And that's a layup for Mr. Wise, really, like just to address and really highlight to non-white people, if you should suspect all white people of being white supremacists, there's no reason at all for you to be engaging in sexual intercourse with a white person.
And I agree as well.
Okay. Do you all feel this is a major concern? I think you all have listened to the show more than once. Do you all feel this is a major problem that should be talked about seriously, and that white people should be stepping up to the plate to address how non-white people are harmed in sexual relationships? Is that something you all can speak on, any of the callers? And then I'll get Mr. Wise.
Absolutely. I do think it is a serious problem that needs addressing.
Do not think there is a greater problem. Know plenty of examples on your show and in my daily activities, people who just can't think straight about racism, white supremacy because they have been in sexual arrangements with white people or are the product of such.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add to it, but it does cause a lot of confusion, as we saw yesterday with the Oreo experience. She was defending slave masters. A person can take on opinions and, just really become very divorced from themselves and confused.
second time we've had a non-white person on the program defending slave masters. I want to point that out. That's what I mean. This is serious. When you talk about non-white people are not confused, it's offensive. The non-white people that have come on this program and the comments that they've made, I'll make sure to have sound clips when you're here for the 21st. But we've had multiple non-white people on this show, not only defending racists, defending blatant slave masters. And you don't think there's confusion? At any rate, let's hear your response, Mr. Wise.
Well, first of all, I'm not saying there are no people of color who are confused. I was simply saying earlier that I don't think it's accurate to say that non-white peoples collectively are all confused about, and that's why the system still exists. There are individuals, absolutely, who are confused about the system, and some of the folks you just mentioned, I have absolutely no doubt if they're going to defend slave masters, and that's a pretty good example of confusion. So we have no argument there. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. As far as the issue of the riskiness of interracial relationships and sexual relationships and emotional relationships and romantic relationships, I spoke about this last time, and I know ultimately we're going to have a disagreement on it, but I did say, and I think I did, and I've always certainly felt, that there is no question that so long as a system of white supremacy is in place, a person who is a person of color, or as you prefer, a non-white person, should certainly be aware of the intense risk that any close connection, let alone sexual, certainly that, but even, I think, very close friendships and romantic relationships that maybe don't even involve sex, that entails, because there is an inherent risk, absolutely, in that person possibly being hurt, in that person being damaged in the relationship, just as I think it is also true under a system of patriarchy that any woman who engages in any relationship with a man needs to keep in mind the way in which sexism and male domination might hurt them, damage them, target them, and manifest in that relationship. That doesn't mean, however, in the case of race, that I think that it is therefore appropriate to say that at no time is a person capable of having that kind of connection, that kind of relationship, including but not limited to a sexual relationship across racial lines, just like I would not say it is wrong for women under patriarchy to have sexual relationships with men. But I do think there is an issue, and it has to be upfront and addressed, and it has to be something that's looked at honestly by both people in that relationship, and a lot of times it isn't. And I think that's the issue. To me, to make the sort of blanket statement that such relationships are always inappropriate, or the term that I remember you preferring last time, incorrect or somehow damaging, would not be, in my estimation, a fair statement any more than it would be appropriate to say that women should never engage in sexual relationships with men so long as we are in a male-dominated society, which we are. And yet that would be not only a sort of preposterous statement, it would be one that if it were carried to its ultimate conclusion, the species would in all likelihood die out. So I don't think that the system of oppression in place necessarily says what we should and shouldn't do, but it certainly says that we have to be intensely aware of what the risks are and what the dangers are whenever we have relationships in a system of oppression across racial lines, across gender lines, across any lines where that oppression comes into play.
Okay. I'm going to get ready to wrap up since we can do this the 21st. We can make this a nice chunk of the program because I think this is very important. But I do want to point out two critical things. Number one, the blog Bandung2, he posted the Oreo experience in her video, White People to the Rescue. He also was the person who tipped me about Dr. Martin Kevorkian, so he has had a lot of helpful information. He has a term on his blog called conflation, and he says that this, he believes, is a refined racist tactic when white people will speak about racism and then they will reel in patriarchy and capitalism and homophobia and all these other things to create confusion. That's his term, to create confusion amongst the non-white people that they talk to. I think this has been demonstrated when Dr. Peggy McIntosh, suspected racist, was on the program this summer, consistently bringing in sexism and other so-called isms to dilute the discussion, which is supposed to be focused on racism, white supremacy. That's one. And two, even though I think Mr. Wise could have been much clearer, I mean, he's incredibly informed about racism, white supremacy, much more so than Mr. Fuller says, millions of black people, and I wholeheartedly agree. Even what he just said, I give that like a C minus. What he just said, I'll give it a C minus in terms of the caution that non-white people need to have about sexual relationships under the system of white supremacy with white people. I don't hear white people even saying that. I hear them saying, you're racist if you don't want to have sexual relationships with white people. You're crazy. You're racist. Something's wrong with you if you're saying anything that sounds like non-white people should not engage in sexual intercourse with white people under the system of white supremacy. Even you saying that would be a significant upgrade over the foolishness that I hear from white people talking about racism when the topic of sexual intercourse comes up. I definitely want to continue this conversation, 21st, continue this conversation because it's important. Malcolm X talked about this consistently. He was calling out Lena Horne, Lorraine Hansberry, other individuals, Harry Belafonte, who were engaged in sexual relationships with white people. This is a major problem. It's been evidenced on this program consistently, even with Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. I would play the sound clip of him saying lotion for the skin if my switchboard wasn't jammed, but it's been evidenced on this program. It's blazoned all over Hollywood, and I think the people who called in have also seen this. They are all non-white victims of white supremacy, but this is incredibly important. I would love to continue this 21st, and homosexual activity, because that ties right in, and I also think that's important, getting your views that homosexual activity under the system of white supremacy could not be a response to racism, white supremacy. I also think that is very important. I hope we'll focus time on that for the February 21st program. Did anybody on the line have any comments? And I'll give Mr. Wise the last word before we close out. Any of the callers, did you have anything you wanted to say before we wrap the program up? Anybody? 404, Cree, back of the bus?
I just wanted to say I'm looking forward to the 21st when the conversation can continue.
Likewise.
For 404, are you still there? Okay, we might have lost her. Groovy. Mr. Wise, until the 21st, I will give you the last word. If you have any thoughts you would like to share before we sign out, or anything you would like to let people know where you're going to be speaking between now and the 21st.
Well, all I really want to say is I do appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. And like I said earlier, even though we obviously get into it a bit, I do agree with you. Ultimately, it is business, and I have great respect for what you're trying to do and the kind of message and information you're trying to get out, even when I disagree with it. And I do appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts. And I hope that by being on the program, not just this time, but from here until I think you said July, right? That we can continue to let these ideas percolate, let people make up their own minds about what they think, let them get perspective from me, from you, from the callers. And so, I really do appreciate the opportunity to do it and to remind you and to be reminded by you that it is not indeed personal, and I do appreciate that.
Exactly. Not personal at all. It is business. I'm definitely looking forward. And as I said, we're not about dogma. I hope that people can listen to the program. Hopefully he'll be here until July, can listen, decide for themselves. Hopefully if I am able to do quality work, there will be a lot more non-white people who are suspicious of Mr. Wise, and a lot more non-white people who are not seeking autographs, handshakes, or hugs, but are asking serious questions about racism, white supremacy. We'll wrap with this. Do you think that would be constructive, Mr. Wise, if when you go to do your speaking? Absolutely?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
If that's what happens, that's, it's all for the purpose of trying to help undo the system of white supremacy. And so if folks ask tough questions and have tough answers and really think more deeply about this, that's what the work is about. And so I think that will be constructive.
Okay. Heard it from Mr. Y. Oh, Justice has one. Justice, rock and roll. Let's get it.
Okay.
Do you think this program is constructive?
Yeah, I do. I do think it's a constructive program, sure. I think any time that people gather on the radio or in person or anywhere to talk about racism and white supremacy, even if there are big disagreements that they have, it's a constructive conversation.
Okay. That's good.
Thank you.
That'll be all for now.
The catchphrase. Outstanding. We will be back February 21st, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m.
Can I make a request?
Central. Shoot.
Gus, can I make a request for February 21st?
Go.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Wise, if between now and then, could you try to think of some instances in which can you recall, think really hard, in which you consciously committed acts of racism by commission?
Yeah, sure will. I will try to come up with some, sure.
Okay.
Can you say that again, please, Cree? Say that one more time. I didn't hear.
I requested Mr. Wise to try to recall instances in which he practiced racism consciously and by acts of commission rather than omission by the time he comes back on the 21st.
Okay. That'll be another thing we can look forward to. I'll make sure, remind me so I don't forget. If you can't call in, remind me or something happens so we can make sure we get that on the 21st if he's able to think of anything or at least if he attempted to think of something. Please shoot me an email to remind me. Anybody else that's listening, shoot me an email, make sure I don't forget that in case anything happens. Hopefully she can call in herself and ask, but anything happens, I definitely want to make sure we get that.
And I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down also so that I'll try to remember it.
Right on. I love it. I think that's going to call it one. I enjoyed the program. I think it might have been constructive. We'll have to see. I am definitely looking forward to February 21st, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Central, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Mr. Tim Wise returns to the cows, Justice and Gus T Renegade. Thank you, Mr. Wise. Enjoyed it, and looking forward to next time.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We'll have to see. I think this was more constructive than the last time he was here. I could be incorrect. The folks that are on the line, if you want to offer your opinion on what you thought about the program, questions, comments, I guess you can curse today. We've had lots of profanity on the program. That's first. Anything you would like to say about the show?
I believe it was constructive as well. There were multiple non-white people who called in and observed or said they also observed Mr. Wise being approached by multitudes of non-whites with tears, and multiple non-white people also confirmed that there were security there at Mount Zion Baptist Church. He said there weren't, so I mean we caught him in a lie.
Yeah, I remember the security. I almost touched one. I remember the security, and I remember having dialogue about the security because I was stunned. I didn't know who the security was there for. I didn't see any non-white people who looked like they wanted to get at Tim Wise, like they were upset with him or thought he was racist. I saw people with tears who looked like, name my child after Tim Wise. He's the best thing in the world. I don't know. I don't know. And they're big. I'm not judging these people. They're victims. Not judging. They're victims. They're victims. They're victims. I actually want to admit one thing. The letters that Tim Wise wrote, we have time to get to more of that now, so 21st. I never read all of those letters until today. When I looked at the first one and I saw the tone that he had and how long these letters are, I stopped immediately and said, this is crazy. Tim Wise gets $4,000 to go out and chat about racism. Why does he care what I have to say about anything? I don't even have a phone. So I stopped immediately. I didn't read anymore. I just thought it was crazy. And I felt it would be in my best interest, working against racism, white supremacy, to make those letters public, because the things he said in those letters, in my view, is a strong contradiction to the way he sounds publicly when he talks about racism. I'm glad I read them today. I'm glad I shared some of the portions, particularly what he said about Dr. Welsing. Pseudoscientific bullshit. That's what he said. I cannot wait to get her on a show with him so he can explain her pseudoscientific bullshit. And he has no master's, no doctorate, no nothing. Anyone else? Did you have comments about today's program?
Briefly speaking about tone, his tone in the letter, if anyone has a chance to listen to the program again and just observe the tone Mr. Wise had with Justice, I mean, that seemed much less than helpful, in my opinion.
You heard the beginning of the show, right? Back of the bus?
Yes, that's correct, at the beginning of the program.
Okay. I agree. It felt like he came out swinging with an attitude at the beginning of the show.
Sure.
Like, that's the answer. I don't care if you like it. That's the answer. Yeah. I mean, this is on the show. I'm not talking. I say this to Mr. Wise when he comes back. He said that in the letter, like, I'm laudatory in public and talk bad about him behind his back. I don't fear Mr. Wise. Come on the show. Come to the White Privilege Conference. I don't care. If he wants to come to Seattle, we can do a live chat. The Elvis Presley of counter-racism, I'm not concerned. Do what you're going to do. Practice white supremacy, I suspect, whatever. Yeah, I hope people really catch that, him talking to a 10-year-old in that manner. And that's come up on the show before, the way people talk to Justice on the show. I thought that was real key in answering her questions and just his whole tone that he had with the victim of white supremacy. And he has kids. He has kids that are her age. I think he could have been much better. Definitely pay attention to that. Anybody else? Anybody else? They might have hung up.
Well, I'm at work, so I can't really talk.
Oh,
but I've been here. I heard you try to talk to me before too, but I was like in the middle of something.
I dig it. I dig it. She's on the job, multitasking. I love it. And get my videos on after work.
Did you see I've been working on it?
Is that you? Are you Love, Truth, and Liberation? Is that you?
Yes, Truth.
Oh,
yes,
I saw.
It's either Truth, Love, Liberation or Love, Truth, Liberation. Probably Love, Truth, Liberation. Yeah.
I saw today. I didn't know if that was you or not. I thought that was somebody else, but I saw you got the Dr. Welding show on. Yep.
2 down, 88 to go.
You got to get this one on. I think this is a good one to get on. Tim Wise is everywhere.
Right.
I think.
And I'm trying to do them in like chronological order, but listening to this one today, I was like, let me do this tonight. Like, let me put this on as soon as I get home.
Yeah, I think this one is important. Get this one on ASAP. Replace white supremacy with justice ASAP, and yeah, get this one on. Did Cree leave, or is she still with us? I think she dipped. Hey, oh well. Thank you for calling in, Cree. We'll make sure you get your question next time. Check her blog, cree7.wordpress.com. Again, cree7.wordpress.com. I think she's doing a show February 7th. I'm not sure. It's not aired in the program yet, but I think she's doing the show then. It was on her blog. She said it's on her blog, so she's not. It's her fault because it's on her blog. She said February 7th. I think Mr. Josh Wickett, who I'm a fan of, I think he's going to be on the show. Check that out. I would tell you the time, but the time wasn't listed, so I don't know. So when I get info, I'll tell you. Make sure you check Mr. Fuller. I think he is doing. I missed the show Monday. I was doing something. Mr. Fuller, he's on talktainmentradio.com. It's just how it sounds. TALKTAINMENT radio.com. I think he's on Mondays, every Monday, from 7 p.m. Eastern. I think it's a 2-hour show, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific, every Monday. So check that out. I believe he's there. I missed it this past Monday, but just go check it out. He should be there. Yeah, we'll be back. No, and I'm not applauding anything happened today either. We got a show tomorrow morning, less than 12 hours. We'll be right back. Dr. Harry Davidson, non-white male, victim of white supremacy. His book, Somebody's Trying to Kill You. We'll see if he has constructive information. We'll see if he knows about Tim Wise. Get his view on Tim Wise, what he thinks. That'll be real cool, given what was said today. Justice, give it to him.
justice.asap@yahoo.com. Again, justice.asap@yahoo.com.
Outstanding. Back of the bus. Anything you would like to share, Tim Wise related or no, if you're still with us?
I am. Just thank you for sharing the program, Justice and Gus, for sharing those who called in Cree and 404 and replace white supremacy with justice.
Outstanding. I also want to point out for the folks, because somebody said on the Facebook group, they said, I thought you weren't going to have Tim Wise back on the show. And they pointed out Dr. Welsing did say that. I want to be very honest about that. Dr. Welsing said, I don't think it's constructive to have Tim Wise on the show repeatedly. It gives him an opportunity to promote and confuse non-white people. I don't think it would be constructive. I did not agree. I felt that it is constructive to have non-white people publicly criticizing and scrutinizing suspected and or admitted racists. I think there's a value to that because I don't know of any programs where Tim Wise goes on and he gets grilled. I don't know of any programs where Tim Wise is coming out swinging at non-white people. I haven't heard that. Now, if it's there, let me know because I would like to listen to their shows and pass that around as well. But I'm not aware. I think that's constructive, and I think it's doing exactly what I hoped. I think it's generating suspicion amongst non-white people that, hey, I don't think I want this guy's autograph. I think I want to ask this guy some questions, see if he can solve some of my problems or, do something constructive for me, not just, sell me a book and talk to me about the privilege he has as a white person. I hope that's what's happening. We will see. We'll get an opportunity to evaluate. If we get to July and his book sales have skyrocketed and people think he's the greatest and he's transformed justice and not the fans, well, Dr. Welsing was correct. If we get to July and a lot of non-white people are suspicious of him and questioning him with great criticism, I'll say we have done well. He said it would be constructive if non-white people were questioning him with suspicion. He did. He said absolutely that would be constructive. So, yeah, hopefully we'll get an opportunity. This will be a live experiment. What happens? Do we generate more suspicion? Do we generate more fans and admirers of Tim Wise? Tune in and see. We'll be back February 21st. Tune in and see. That'll be Matthew's remark exposes complexity. There's an article. It's on Yahoo. I guess this just came out today. It says Matthew's remark exposes complexity of transcending race. 5 little words. I forgot he was black. Have exposed a contradiction in the idea of a post-racial nation. I guess this came, President Obama gave his State of the Union address earlier this week, and this gentleman, Chris Matthews, he's a host on MSNBC, said he forgot he was black. He said he's post-racial by all appearances. I have no idea what that means. I forgot he was black tonight for an hour. He's gone a long way to become a leader of this country and pass so much history in just a year or two. I mean, it's something we don't even think about. He said for the first, that is crazy. I forgot he was black tonight for an hour. So at the end of the hour, that is, man, I'm done. I don't talk anymore. I'm done. I don't know what he did at the end of that hour to be re-niggerized, but apparently he could only be post-racial for 1 hour. And then back to the slave quarters. Toby, get over there. You are now white again. Non-white again. Sorry about that. Hope you enjoyed your hour. This is the folly of racism, white supremacy. I'm done. Back of the bus, anything?
I'm good. Nothing to say. Just replace white supremacy with justice. Continue to support the cows and spread the word to other victims of racism. Get them to tune in next month for Dr. Welsing and Mr. Tim Wise.
Outstanding. Get the blog, Back of the Bus, nonwhitealliance.wordpress.com. One more time, it's nonwhitealliance.wordpress.com. We'll be back next month. I'm going to prep for tomorrow's program. Lauren Ashley's in the chat room. She had questions for Tim Wise and she didn't want to call in. Hopefully that'll be eroded too. People will be more aggressive and they'll want to call in and question Tim Wise about things. She also asked, there's a white person who I guess is a fan of the cows, and there are quite a few. Tim Wise said he likes the show. Apparently there are a lot of white people who like this show for some reason. She listens to the show. She has a non-white child. I'm going to see if I can get her on the show because I think that would be real interesting to chat with her. Does she listen to the show with her child? Does she share information with her child? Yes, I like putting people on the spot. But, yeah, we're going to see if we can get her on the program. I think that would be real constructive, white person with a non-white offspring, and what information they share with their non-white child. So hopefully we can work that out, too. Back of the bus, Gus, Justice, the admitted white supremacist known as Tim Wise. Justice and Gus will be back tomorrow morning. Tim Wise will be back next month. Replace white supremacy with justice as soon as possible. Thank you for supporting the cows. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Check us out, Dr. Harry Davidson, Friday, January 29th, 12 noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll be right back. Dr. Harry Davidson. Thank you for supporting the cows. Replace white supremacy with justice as soon as possible. Thank you. Signing out.